His brutal regime for far, far too long. We're talking to regional allies. It's very important now that there's a political settlement, a political way forward, and it's very, very important that we emphasise that civilians and minorities must be protected in this process. But very, very pleased that Assad has fallen.
Well, the UK says it is quickly reviewing its stance on Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, one of the rebel groups that helped topple the Assad regime, though it does still remain banned as a terrorist organisation. Cabinet Minister Pat McFadden said this morning the government hasn't decided on its position with Syria's future, described as very uncertain at this stage. The group, once linked to al-Qaeda, played a key role alongside other factions in ousting Assad. Next, let's just bring you a breaking line. We're hearing from Italy that at least 2 people are dead, multiple feared missing, after a huge fireball erupted from a building in Florence. Pictures showing thick black smoke and flames rising from the scene, prompting an urgent emergency service response, including a helicopter rushing to the area. The explosion, believed to have come from an oil depot, sent audible shockwaves, residents say, through the area, with reports of serious injuries. Local authorities are now urging residents to find indoor shelter in a statement released not long ago, adding not to go near the facility. While the Tuscany's regional president has confirmed that hospitals and emergency services are still on high alert, as the number of casualties and injuries appears to continue rising. In the US, Jay-Z has dismissed allegations that he raped a 13-year-old girl alongside Sean Combs in 2000, calling it a blackmail attempt. The lawsuit filed in New York claims the pair drugged and assaulted the accuser after the MTV Video Awards while a female celebrity watched. In a statement, Jay-Z called those allegations heinous and accused the claimant's lawyer of exploiting the case for financial gain. The accuser is seeking damages while Sean Combs faces separate charges and remains in custody. Jay-Z says his only heartbreak is for his family and wife Beyoncé as they face public scrutiny over the claims. Sir Keir Starmer is in the Gulf today on his first trip there as Prime Minister, aiming to secure billions in trade and investment. After meeting the UAE's president, he's also held talks with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman to push for a free trade deal with 6 Gulf nations. Labour says the deal could bring in over £8 billion for the UK each year, with investments in energy, infrastructure and artificial intelligence. Well, that trip, ending tomorrow in Cyprus, also focuses on regional conflicts like the Israel-Hamas war and the unrest now in Syria. Critics, though, question the time spent abroad so early in Starmer's premiership. Health leaders here are warning it's now or never to get a flu jab as cases are skyrocketing earlier in the season than ever before. Hospitals say they're grappling with a quademic of flu, COVID, norovirus and RSV, with flu hospitalisations quadrupling since last year. Children aged between 5 and 14 are the worst affected group, with fears there could be a fresh wave of adult cases. Officials have also said the flu vaccine is the best defence against the virus, urging anyone eligible to get protected before the festive period. It comes as the latest NHS figures show hospital beds are already 95% full, with a challenging winter coming. Travel chaos is continuing after Storm Darragh battered the UK this weekend, leaving thousands without power and disrupting major train routes. Passengers on the West Coast Main Line and across Wales face cancellations, with warnings to avoid travel until some areas clear midday today. The storm brought gusts of up to 96 miles an hour, killing, sadly, 2 men and causing widespread damage, with engineers still battling to clear debris and restore power. Well, the Met Office says calmer weather is on the way, but temperatures will remain cold, staying in single figures. And let's turn to some royal news for you. The King has revealed a quirky childhood memory. Queen Elizabeth apparently practised for her coronation by wearing her crown during his bath time. His Majesty shared the story in Coronation Girls, a documentary about Canadian women who attended the 1953 event. He also admitted feeling slightly anxious himself wearing the heavy St Edward's crown on his own coronation. Well, the documentary, airing on Boxing Day, follows 12 women revisiting London, where they were surprised by a royal visit from the King himself. That's it from me for now. I'll be back with you in around half an hour with all the latest top stories. Now, though, it's back to Charlie and Emily.
Welcome back to Good Afternoon Britain. It's now 12:08 and it is Charlie Peters with me today.
Yes, what an exciting experience for all involved, especially you at home, because we've got plenty to go through, and this is my sort of dream day from a news agenda, because you've got international news that matters to Britain, big concerns, and we've also got issues at home that you're going to be really engaged with.
We are
Starting
indeed.
off in the Midlands, where some farmers are.
Yeah, we are. I should say
today.
that Tom is away for the week, so
Yes.
it will be Charlie, and I believe also Cameron Walker's going to be also hosting with me, so we've got a nice mix for you. But yes, let's turn our attention to the Midlands.
Farmers are gathering today at the rural capital of food, Melton Mowbray, to show support for the agricultural industry. Now, the group was set up this year to fight for the future of farming in response to the government's inheritance tax raid.
Yes, so green charities, including wildlife trusts, have also shown their support for farmers, calling for the government to address England's broken agricultural sector.
Well, let's cross live now to our East Midlands reporter, Will Hollis, who can join us from Melton Mowbray. Will, what have you been seeing today? What's going on up there?
Good afternoon. Yes, well, it's a sea of green in Melton Mowbray, the rural capital of food, because of Stilton cheese and Melton Mowbray pork pies. People have just been speaking on a makeshift stage in the back of a trailer on hay bales, and there are hundreds of people from this farming community who have come from around the region, the Midlands. It might not be to the same scale of the big protest we saw last month in London in Parliament Square, but this represents a massive chunk of the community here in Melton Mowbray. A part of that community as well is Frankie and Isabel. Thank you so much for reminding me, Frankie and Isabel. Lots of people here today. Just tell me, why are you down here today as young farmers?
I'm down here today because this inheritance tax and Labour's new budget will, especially as young farmers, impact us, as we will be the ones to inherit. So we will have to pay these large taxes just to inherit something that generations have worked tirelessly for years to earn.
And what is your family farm like? What might be the effect of the inheritance tax?
So I'm from an arable and pig farm, and the likely effect is that me and my cousins and my siblings won't be able to inherit, because parts of our farm will have to be sold, and it'd just be devastating for the whole family to know that pieces of land that have been in our farm for generations will have to go.
Isabel and Frankie. Frankie, just tell me, what might it mean for your family farm as a young farmer, the inheritance tax and the wider budget?
So there's a huge threat to my family farm. There's only me and my brother in our generation. So with this inheritance tax, we're probably going to have to sell land, which has been in our family for years. And it's really scary, actually, because dedicating my education to agriculture means that I'm dedicating myself to it, and it's scary that I might not be able to go into such a vital industry for the UK.
The Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, and the Labour government says they need to tax farmers. They need to tax farmers and wealthy landowners because they've got to pay for public services. Why should they not, from your opinion as a young farmer?
I agree with taxing the people that buy land to avoid tax, but that's not family farmers, that's not small farmers, that's not most of the farms in the UK. Family farms are vital to this industry. We already get taxed enough. We already go through so much hardship. It's a 24-hour lifestyle. We don't stop. Any weather, we just don't stop. So by stabbing us in the back, pretty much, the government aren't supporting us. We're not going to have self-sufficiency, and it's scary. It really is scary.
You two are just two young farmers. There are many others here. What's the wider young farmer community feeling about this?
I think they're feeling the same as us. I think they're all worried and upset because, like us, they're just young people that a lot of them haven't been able to have a say in the election, voting, and I think everyone's just really worried because I don't think Labour have taken into consideration the amount of hard work that goes into a family farm, and that children from farms have grown up knowing, because from young ages all farm kids will be out on the farm in all weathers, doesn't matter, and I think that everyone's just worried that years of hard work will go to waste, and that children who've always wanted to become a farmer, follow their parents' or grandparents' footsteps, this might not be an option for them anymore.
Isabel and Frankie, thank you so much for taking time away from the speeches. Let's just give you a bit of a flavour of Melton Mowbray. This is the home of the pork pie. This is the home of the Stilton cheese. But today, it is the home of the conversation around farming and Labour's inheritance tax, which farmers say will cripple the industry.
Us that report from Melton Mowbray. Really interesting to get the perspective from younger farmers, the future generation, because they're the ones who are going to be saddled with the tax. They're going to have to find it.
Yeah, and this is a generational crisis, of course. I mean, this is going to be a significant issue for them. Who would get into that trade now is what many young farmers will be saying. Indeed, we just heard it there.
Yeah, just sell off the land and, you know, do something else.
Yeah, well,
not great for the future of food.
Security.
No, indeed. Should we turn our attention to Syria, because it's been a tumultuous 48 hours. Bashar al-Assad, he's been ousted by rebels after 24 years in power.
Now, the former president has been granted asylum in Moscow, according to Russian state media, and many are now left asking what the toppling will mean for Syria and the region as a whole.
Yes, here in Britain, Syrian refugees, a lot of them have vowed to return to their homeland as they were celebrating rebels seizing control of Damascus. Now, a key commander on the ground urged displaced people all over the world to return home, saying a free Syria awaits them. But just what will they be returning to if they do choose to return, and what exactly will it mean for us here in the United Kingdom?
Well, joining us now in the studio is Andrew Fox, a research fellow at the Henry Jackson Society. Andrew, thanks for joining us. First and foremost, what is your immediate reaction to the toppling of the al-Assad regime, and what do you think are going to be the sort of second and third order effects here now?
I think being glad that Assad is gone is an absolutely correct response. You know, this man was an absolute monster, and as the rebel groups uncover, you know, the prisons that he held, the atrocities he committed, and Israel last night was striking the chemical weapon stores that he still had. We can be delighted that this gentleman is now no longer part of Syria's governance. However, what my biggest concern is what comes next, because the group that has taken over, HTS, they're an Al-Qaeda Islamic State offshoots. They've been exceptionally radical in the past, and whilst they're making more moderate noises now, we don't know whether or not that is going to be something that carries on in future.
Yes, because that's the question, isn't it? It's all well and good to celebrate the loss of a dictator, a brutal dictator who murdered hundreds of thousands of Syrians, of his own people. But that question of what comes next, there seems to be an ongoing debate currently in the West over whether to continue to prescribe this particular rebel group. We see them as being Islamist extremists. You say there's potentially that they could be more moderate now. Can these types of groups really change?
We've got some great examples from recent history as to how this goes. So we've seen dictators around the Middle East being toppled since 2003. We've seen Saddam go. We've seen Gaddafi go. We've seen a variety of other countries who've had regime change, and it's got worse. So that's a really big concern, is that this pattern continues. We've also seen a rebel group who promised to reform, and that's the Taliban in Afghanistan, who, of course, made all the right noises during the withdrawal, and now we find women in Afghanistan can't leave the house.
I suppose, Andrew, people will be watching this in Britain, looking at the situation in Syria, and their main concern, I think, will be, first and foremost, are there going to be more refugees from Syria coming to Europe? But also, secondly, are we going to have yet another safe haven for terrorists in the Middle East where they can have camps, train and prepare to launch attacks on Europe? Do you think that risk has heightened as a consequence of this toppling, even if it was an appalling regime that people wanted to fall?
Well, Syria's been full of deeply shady terrorist groups for a very long time, and they haven't made it outside Syria's borders. I think we're safer, for example, because Hezbollah have been neutered in Lebanon, who are a renowned gun-running, drug-smuggling, people-trafficking organisation worldwide. When it comes to Syria, I think the challenge for the West is going to be containing whatever happens next. In the best-case scenario, it becomes some sort of federated country where people don't like each other, but they can live alongside one another. In the worst-case scenario, it's going to turn into vicious bloodshed of warlords fighting for territory. And in that latter eventuality, that's where we need to make sure we've got that problem contained.
And hundreds of thousands of Syrians, of course, moved to the West to find refuge, tens of thousands in Britain alone. We have seen scenes of many Syrians out celebrating, whether it's Manchester, Birmingham, parts of London, of course, celebrating what this means for Syria, talking about how they do want to go home now, how they will go home now. But is it actually any safer than it was under Assad as we speak? Or do we not know that yet?
We don't know, and it probably depends on which area you're in and which ethnicity or religion you're from. It's going to vary depending on who that individual refugee is.
With 1.5 million Syrians in Germany, tens of thousands in Britain as well, do you think that all those statements, let's go back now, do you think that sort of move could be supported by, say, the British government, the German government? Or do you think there will be some now pressure on those Western governments to support the return of refugees?
I think it's going to be a time issue. We still don't know what HTS are going to do, how they're going to behave, whether they're going to continue with the moderate position, well, the more moderate position that they seem to be taking, or whether they are going to revert to full jihad, as soon as they've secured their position. Further down the line, there's certainly an opportunity for people to go home if things go in the best case scenario that I articulated a minute ago. But should things go heavily south quickly, then unfortunately I don't think that's going to happen.
Also, is this the end of al-Assad and his regime? Is that in stone now?
I think so.
We're hearing that he's taken haven in Russia. Is that the end of that story?
I think so. He's left the country. One of his family members was hung from a crane today. The footage of that is quite ghastly. And his army has collapsed and they fled. The main fighting forces he had were Hezbollah, who have been seen fleeing back to Lebanon, and of course the Russians, who are very busy elsewhere at the moment and didn't have the resources needed to back up Assad whilst continuing their fight in Ukraine.
But Andrew, it also seemed while they didn't have the resources, they don't also necessarily have the will to fight for Assad. Bring this out a bit further. What do you think that lack of Russian support for the declining Assad regime says about the conflict in Ukraine? Does it show that Russia's on the back foot? They really are focusing on Ukraine. They couldn't possibly do it. Does this have a sign of a weakened Moscow at the moment?
I think so. And the fact that we're seeing North Korean fighters, Yemeni fighters being dragged into the frontline trenches in Ukraine shows the extent to which Russia is feeling the pressure of resources when it comes to fighting a war. They've created a conflict in Ukraine where it's essentially a grinding match. And whoever can grind the most is probably going to win. And that grind has sucked up so much resource that I think Russia really are going to struggle to expand their power in the near future.
Well, we await to see what happens next in Syria and the repercussions for the rest of the world, not just the region. Major Andrew Fox, Research Fellow at the Henry Jackson Society, thank you very much indeed for coming into the studio.
Now, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. There's lots more coming up on today's show as Suella Braverman's husband joins Reform UK. Speculation is rife as to whether the Home Secretary will follow suit. That's up next. Don't go anywhere.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
British 10-year-old has beaten Stephen Hawking and Albert Einstein in an IQ test, would you believe? Genius Krish Arora got the maximum score of 162, which puts him in the top 1% globally.
Goodness me. Well, Krish's parents noticed his brilliant potential after learning he could read fluently by the age of 4.
Krish, how does it feel to be a child genius?
I feel really happy and privileged.
Aww. Do you see it as a gift that you have?
Yeah.
Oh, that's just wonderful. Nichelle, what do you make of your child being a genius? When did it become apparent to you that Krish had something different, something special?
I think at the age of 4, he was doing things that were way beyond and above his age.
Yeah.
He could read fluently and he could spell correctly, and he was doing complex decimal divisions. So we thought that he's on to something. I think there's a spark out here.
Wow. And how are you reading books, Krish? Did you just pick them up from your mum and dad's bookshelf and just start reading to yourself?
We used to go to the library and we got books.
Such a good tip. Such a good tip as parents.
Yeah.
Head to the library, take your kids to the library.
So, Nichelle, can Krish just do it all? Is he just an all-rounder genius? Every subject, every talent, he can do it all?
Absolutely, and he helps out the family as well. He's been teaching me grade 1 piano, and he hopes, and I repeat, he hopes that I'm going to complete it in 12 months' time. And he also helps out Mum, because when Mum is teaching his sister, Mum sometimes says, Krish, go solve that problem and, help your sister out. So yes, he can do it all.
Krish, you're a superstar.
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
down to earth,
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
and most importantly, honest,
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
OK, good afternoon, Britain. It's now 12:24. You're with me, Emily Carver, and Charlie Peters today, which is rather nice. Now, the former Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, she's spoken out about her husband's defection to Reform UK. She wants to put an end to speculation about her own future. He's set to become the senior campaigner for Nigel Farage's party, distancing himself from Keir Starmer's following his inheritance tax raid on farmers. And you've got some exclusive footage for us, don't you?
Yes, I do. Here is footage of Rael Braverman out campaigning already for the party. You see there, he's just on the left of Darren Selkis, who was a reformed candidate at the last general election. Not confirmed he will be at the next GE, but yesterday Nigel Farage took to X to say that Braverman's husband had been canvassing for the party, and there we are. There he is, out on the streets yesterday, trying to tap up some potential new reform voters, and it's been covered over the last day or so about the reception he's had, and it comes on the back of quite a few defections from the
Yes, I should say, he's not the one at the front talking. He's the one at the back.
Yes, on the left.
bull-headed gentleman at the back on the left. But there, he's very much, at it already, isn't he? Out campaigning. I mean, he says the Conservative Party has become a shadow of what it once stood for: incompetence, failure to deliver, betraying the trust of the British people. So he's been quite scathing, although he does say that he regrets it's come to this. Should we speak to the Reform mayoral candidate for Greater Lincolnshire, Dame Andrea Jenkins, who's similarly gone on the same journey, I suppose? Dame Andrea, what do you make of this then? Were you in the know? Did you know that Mr. Braverman was going to make this move?
I did hear some things. However, I think it's great news. I mean, you said about Lincolnshire. I'm in Lincolnshire today, in the oldest pub in Louth. I was on the docks watching the fish come in this morning. And no, this is fabulous news, Emily. And I really hope that that we get Suella next. I mean, I'd say that this has been a truly amazing, week, 10 days that I've defected over to Reform. And, to the likes of Suella and to the likes of her husband, Raoul, the enthusiasm is amazing. It feels like the time in the Conservative Party when we got Brexit. And it's just brilliant. And look at the recent polling, only 2 points behind the Conservatives. So I think the only way is up now. And getting Mr. Braverman, Raoul over, I think that's fabulous news.
And Dame Andrea, we heard yesterday from Richard Fuller, the Tory Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, saying that the Tories need to offer more clarity on their plans. Do you feel as though a lack of any sort of solid position on some of the ongoing issues in debate at the moment is affecting the number of people coming from the Conservatives into Reform?
Well, no, I think what it is, I mean, when I defected, I got lots of nice messages. I only had a couple from former colleagues who weren't so nice. And there's about 5 people who said to me that they wanting to come over, but they want to wait till the new year, etc. So, a lot of people said, good on you. But I think the problem with the Conservative Party at the moment is still 2 parties. You've got the One Nation who belong in the Lib Dems. You've got the Thatcherite, what I consider true Conservatives. And I don't think they can get a true policy which satisfies both of them. And that was how we got here in the first place. And so I do think you will see some more defections, and I do think there'll be some big names.
I mean, as much as I do that it's going to be very difficult for Reform to make the kind of gains it needs in order to be the governing party of this country, just because of the way our system works, Andrea. So at some point, it's going to be the case that the Conservatives have to join up with Reform if they're going to beat Labour.
No, I mean, all I'd say about that, I mean, we've seen, first past the post actually favours bigger parties, doesn't it? Especially Labour Party, etc. But look how Richard won in here in Lincolnshire. I think that sort of demonstrates, what is possible. And we are 4.5 to 5 years potentially away from the next general election. And for us to be ahead of Labour in the polls, only 2 points behind the Conservatives, I seriously think that, we are going to be strong contenders. And I agree. In the end, we've got to find a way to actually take the fight to the socialists, because we do not. I mean, the last 6 months have been dreadful with the Labour Party, and we cannot let them have another 5 years.
OK, well, Dame Andrea Jenkins, thank you very much indeed for joining us today, the Reform mayoral candidate for Greater Lincolnshire. Very interesting, isn't it? I find it quite interesting from a sort of, I don't know what you'd call it, sociological view, because, when husband and wife make major different decisions, go in different directions.
Yeah. And you heard Suella Braverman being asked about this. Oh, he's gone, will you now follow?
Yeah.
And you said, we're in the 21st century, not the 19th. Women don't have to adopt the politics of their husbands. But at the same time, this speculation about her switching over to Reform has been going around for quite a long time.
Yeah, she said, my husband and I have a healthy respect for each other's independence. He doesn't tell me how to do my job, and I don't tell him how to pick a political party. Yeah, I think that's fair enough, to be honest.
I think that's a legitimate statement.
When if Patrick tried to tell me how to do my job, I'd tell him to get lost.
Yeah, I would love to be a fly on the wall if that were ever to occur. That would be the absolute business. And on that note, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. There's lots more coming up on today's show, as Jay-Z is accused of raping a 13-year-old girl in 2000. He denies the allegations and brands it as a blackmail attempt. More on that after your headlines with Sam Francis.
Very good afternoon to you. 12:32 exactly, and Downing Street is calling on all sides in Syria to protect civilians and ensure vital aid reaches those in need. It comes as thousands have taken to the streets of Damascus, celebrating the rapid collapse of the Assad regime after a coalition of rebel groups seized the capital on Sunday. Their swift offensive toppled 2 major cities in just 12 days, leaving the United Nations now scrambling for an emergency meeting later today. Sir Keir Starmer has joined world leaders condemning the brutal regime of Bashar al-Assad, highlighting the devastating toll it has taken on the Syrian people. Now, with the situation continuing to unfold, the UK government says its focus is on working with regional allies to restore peace and stability. The government says it is also quickly reviewing its stance on Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, one of the rebel groups that helped topple the Assad regime, but remains banned as a terrorist organisation. Cabinet Office Minister Pat McFadden says the UK's government hasn't decided on its position, with Syria's future described as very uncertain. The group, once linked to al-Qaeda, played a key role alongside other factions in ousting Assad. In the United States, rapper Jay-Z has dismissed allegations that he raped a 13-year-old girl alongside Sean Combs in 2000, calling it a blackmail attempt. The lawsuit, filed in New York, claims the pair drugged and assaulted the accuser after the MTV Video Music Awards while a female celebrity watched. In a statement, Jay-Z called the allegations heinous and accused the claimant's lawyer of exploiting the case for financial gain. Jay-Z said his only heartbreak is for his family as they face public scrutiny over the claims. 2 men have been charged after police seized drugs worth over £700,000 in Glasgow. Officers raided a property in Mount Vernon on Friday, discovering heroin valued at £660,000 and cannabis worth almost £120,000. The 2 men, aged 27 and 33, are due to appear in court, while Detective Superintendent Sarah Taylor has described the seizure as significant and a clear message against illegal drugs in Scottish communities. And let's bring you an update on the latest breaking developments in Italy, where at least 2 people are dead and multiple believed missing after a huge fireball erupted from a building in Florence. Thick black smoke and flames were seen rising from the scene, prompting emergency services, including a helicopter, to rush to the area. The explosion, believed to have come from an oil depot, sent audible shockwaves through the area, according to residents, with some reports of serious injuries. Local authorities are urging residents to now find indoor shelter, with the Tuscany's regional president confirming that hospitals and emergency services are now on high alert. Those are the latest headlines. A full roundup at the top of the hour. And now, though, a short break.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Bit of a north-south split today, with many northern areas fine, sunny, a little chilly, but in the south, a lot of cloud, quite a few showers and a cold wind blowing. Storm Darragh may have cleared away and high pressure has moved in behind, but still a lot of isobars on the chart across England and Wales, suggesting a brisk and chilly wind, which is feeding in quite a few showers actually over eastern England. Showers coming and going over parts of the Midlands, maybe southwest England too. Most of Wales dry, certainly much of Scotland, Northern Ireland dry, and plenty of sunshine for central western Scotland and Northern Ireland. Temperatures here, single figures. In fact, most of us struggling to get to double digits, possibly in parts of the south, but it'll feel colder here actually because of that wind. So a pretty chilly feeling day, and quite rapidly tonight with clear skies. Temperatures are going to tumble across Scotland, so a frost forming. We'll dip well below freezing by morning. Also going to see some fog patches forming, probably not this evening, but as we run through the night, the fog is likely to thicken up, not just across central and southern Scotland, but also parts of Northern Ireland. Most of England and Wales keeping the cloud through the evening. The showers fading over the Midlands and southwest England, but we'll keep some going on well into this evening over parts of Suffolk, Essex, Kent, in and around the home counties. Away from the southeast corner, though, most will have a dry night. As I said, some fog thickening up across central and southern Scotland, Northern Ireland. Temperatures really plummeting here as well. We could get down to -5, -6, maybe a touch lower through some sheltered glens of Scotland. Towns and cities generally down to -3 or -4. Staying above freezing across most of England and Wales with more cloud. Not as many showers around tomorrow, but still quite a grey day for many. Still the odd shower across the southeast, and still quite a chilly wind blowing. So a cold feeling day tomorrow, even if you've got the sunny spells. Temperatures struggling, and for some, where the fog sticks, we may not get above freezing all day.
The latest GB News travel.
Westbound on the M180, there is a lane closure to emergency repairs from Scunthorpe at 3 through to Junction 2. Traffic is coping well. Northbound on the M1, a lane closure and queue in traffic to an overturned vehicle. Recovery work is taking place just before Junction 5 for Watford. Anti-clockwise on the M25, there is a partial block causing queue in traffic for 3 miles to an obstruction on the road just after 27 for the M11 interchange. It was 2 lanes before the Belcommon Tunnel. Anti-clockwise on the M25, there is also a lane blocked on the entry slip road at 21 to an overturned vehicle, though traffic coping well there. 2 lanes are closed over the southbound side of the M11, causing long delays. It's to an earlier vehicle fire between Harlow North through to Harlow. Delays at Junction 8 for Bishop Stortford.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back. It's 12:37. You're watching Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Well, let's cross straight to Westminster now, where our political editor Christopher Hope has been at a briefing with the PM's official spokesperson. What have you heard in the lobby today?
Yeah, hi Charlie, hi Emily. Welcome to Parliament for the start of another big week. This meeting with the PM's official spokesman dominated, of course, by Syria. Right now the government hasn't much more to say than it's working for political peace and stability and talking to our allies in the region. No comment on a question about whether the British citizenship of the wife of Bashar al-Assad should be removed. She, of course, with her family, is now in Moscow, we understand. And the question now is, can she come to the UK? She is still a British passport holder, so that is possible. We'll be pressing on that all day. Also, the UK is not speaking directly to HTS, the group of rebels who have taken over Syria, because the UK's policy is not to talk to proscribed terrorist groups. They don't rule out, though, when I asked them about speaking through a third party, there are reports today that the US is speaking via Turkey to this new Syrian regime, this nascent Syrian regime. So it's very much a fluid situation. In terms of Syrians here who are now saying to reporters over the weekend they want to go home, that's really up for them to decide, the government says, not something which the UK government will facilitate. Elsewhere in politics, no plans to bring back ID cards. There's talk over the weekend about a single digital identifier, but no plans for ID cards for all of us to show if asked to by the police. That was mooted by Tony Blair's government back in the noughties and has been mooted again by his foundation since then, but no plans to go down that route for this government. And also just today, Rachel Reeves is in Brussels trying to find common cause with EU finance ministers, but the official line on reversing Brexit remains the same. We've left the European Union, the government says today. We're not rejoining the single market or the customs union.
Yes, very interesting, because she's going to be with European finance ministers, isn't she? And this is usually a meeting just of European Union countries. Are we going to be the only non-EU country present?
It's a great question, Emily. I think we are, and the idea is we're trying to almost throw an arm of welcome out to the European Union after those years after Brexit, with the Tory government giving a cold shoulder to European Union. They're trying to say, look, we can work together with our nearest trading bloc, but on the fundamentals, the sovereignty issue of Brexit, there's no movement, and also no plans, as they sit at the moment, no plans, because I did ask the government this just now, to bring back freedom of movement for the under 30s. That, of course, is a mooted idea. The EU is quite keen on that, but that would go towards the issue of freedom of movement, which is a no-go for this government.
And Shobha, just to reiterate before we let you go, on the Syrian refugee question, the government essentially saying it's not up to us. If Syrian refugees wish to go back to Syria, fine, but we're not going to do anything at all to try and facilitate or support it in that direction at all.
That is exactly right, Emily.
OK, perfect. Thank you very much. Christopher Hope there in Westminster for us. He's been speaking to the Prime Minister's spokesperson. So we always get little snippets of what's going on.
Well, there's an interesting summary there about the digital ID. Maybe we can come back to that one later. But moving on, US rapper Jay-Z has hit back at a lawsuit which alleges that he, along with Sean Diddy Combs, raped a 13-year-old girl, biz and music broadcaster Hayley Sparks. Hayley, thanks very much for joining us. There's been a bit of a legal back and forth on this already, with some pretty strong words exchanged.
Yes, there has. I mean, it's a really devastating situation all round. The 13-year-old who's remained anonymous is obviously making this lawsuit, allegations that she was raped and sexually assaulted by Jay-Z and P. Diddy. And originally, the lawsuit was filed back in October, and Jay-Z was an unnamed celebrity. It's just been relaunched and his name has been included. As you say, he's spoken out instantly, saying that this is absolutely heinous. It's heartbreaking for his family. Of course, Jay-Z is married to Beyonce. They have 3 children together. And in his statement, he's saying he's had to sit down and explain to his children what's going on. And his take on it, that it's to do with something that's completely alleged at this stage, but of course, very, very devastating to hear.
Yes, really shocking. The girl in question remains unnamed, but the allegations that she was drugged and raped by both Jay-Z and Diddy Combs, all at a party after an MTV Music Awards. This is very shocking indeed, but of course Jay-Z is saying this is just legal blackmail, absolutely nothing to see here. This is going to be very difficult indeed to talk to my children about, because of course Beyonce and Jay-Z have three girls, don't they? Or 2 girls and 1 boy, quite young children.
Yes, and I believe some of his children are around a similar age of the alleged victim. But looking into the story further, it does appear that the 13-year-old who is obviously making these claims apparently does have a lot of detail. She's talking about other celebrities being at this after party, which was back in 2000 after the VMAs. She tried to get into this after party by allegedly speaking to this limo driver who said, yes, you know, P. Diddy really likes young girls like you. I can get you in. And then she alleges that she didn't attend the awards, but attended the after party, was given a drink. She then felt drowsy. And this is when the sexual assault took place. But because there is a lot of detail in the story, they're suggesting that obviously there could be potential witnesses that could either, you know, be there to support her claim or potentially refute her claim. So we'll have to see how it plays out.
Well, Hayley, despite all of that detail, I mean, you said earlier that Jay-Z has said that he's got heartbreak for his family. His statement actually says, my only heartbreak is for my family. So a very fierce rejection of these allegations. But as you say, a lot of detail around them. And there's also been a stark response from the lawyer representing that 13-year-old girl.
Yes, so Tony Busby is the representation of the alleged 13-year-old victim. I think where the confusion is coming in is because Jay-Z is saying, well, there's blackmail involved here. But I believe this is because the lawyer for the alleged victim, Tony Busby, offered a mediation session before obviously making this lawsuit public, which was rejected. But there are lots of different reasons for that. So I don't think it's a black and white situation.
Well, it all adds to the idea that this industry is full of seediness and wrongdoing. Hayley Sparks, thank you very much indeed. Showbiz and music broadcaster. As we said before, those allegations are very much denied by Jay-Z, but we await to see what happens next. But this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Lots more coming up on today's show. Yes, police have lost vital evidence during a fresh investigation into the Rotherham abuse scandal. This is a Charlie Peters exclusive. A survivor feels they've been let down by Yorkshire police very badly indeed. Details next.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
My next guest's book will certainly provoke you. Lord Saatchi's book, Orgasm, probes 21 such ideas, chapter by chapter, in a stimulating reading experience, covering subjects from geopolitics and etiquette to the economy and the afterlife. Whereas Saatchi argues that rigorous thinking can create a blissful mental experience.
Well, the title is Orgasm, and I try to investigate the question of whether it's possible for there to be an orgasm of the mind which is equal in bliss to a physical orgasm. That's very interesting. And theoretically, the way that arises, I'll finish. Theoretically, the way that arises is by addressing conflicting ideas and then for there to be a revelation of true wisdom. That's the purpose of the book. And I think you can sum up British politics completely in 2 sentences. You'll understand very well, Mike. Conservatives are efficient but cruel. Labour is caring but incompetent. So you can see there that if you have a situation in which the Conservative Party turns out to be, in people's opinion, inefficient and cruel, well, then you're likely to have a very bad election result, which is exactly what we just did. And why?
So you have quite a lot to say to Kemi Badenoch. I mean, the first thing you would say to her would be, read my book, please, I suppose.
Well, that's absolutely the first thing. It's a perfect Christmas present for her to give, as I was saying. So that's number one. So after she's done that, well, then her level of wisdom, which I'm sure is already very high, will be greatly increased, and she'll be able to address the complex, provocative, controversial issues aired in this book.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home? Talking about? Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy. Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. This is Good Afternoon Britain with me, Emily and Charlie Peters. And we've been having a little look at our inbox, haven't we?
Yes,
or gbnews.com/your say, not the inbox any longer.
No, it's pretty lively this afternoon. I just want to read out one from Anthony Lewis, who wants to know what's happened to Shamima Begum amid this rupture in Syria. Is she still there? Are there any plans for her to come back? Well, Pat McFadden, the Labour Minister, said that there was no plans to look at her case again. And I think it's also important to stress, Anthony, that Shamima Begum is in the part of Syria which is controlled by Kurdish forces. So there's not been actually much of a change in the northeast of the country as a consequence of this uprising. But amid all of these difficult situations in Syria with the toppling of the regime and these rebel forces coming through, those questions are going to be raised. What happens to all of the ISIS prisoners in the country? What happens to the many foreign nationals who've been kept there? Emily, I think those are going to be among the questions that are raised, not just about refugees here, but also people over there who have connections to this country and other Western nations.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't that long ago that Shamima Begum lost her... What number appeal was it? I mean, it seems like there were endless appeals.
Several tribunals.
She's lost them all. Of course, Grumpy Grandad's got in touch. He said, Assad going's great, but if an Islamic group with links to ISIS takes over, it's not going to be any better off. Yes, I think the links are with Al-Qaeda. So this is what I fear.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not an expert in Middle Eastern politics or indeed Syria, but what I do know is that if you celebrate the falling of a dictator, you've got to think about what comes next.
Absolutely.
And the what comes next may well be even more dangerous than what they had to begin with, or at least with Assad. We shall see. We shall see. But shall we turn to a story that you've brought to the table today? This relates to a survivor from the Rotherham abuse scandal.
Yeah, so she's claimed that she's been let down by South Yorkshire Police. Her name is Tina, it's not her real name, during an investigation into allegations of coercion, fraud and violent threats. Now, she says that she was exploited by gangs as a child, but has exclusively told GB News that she was regroomed as an adult and that police failed to support her.
So yet another young woman badly let down by our police and presumably other authorities too.
Yeah, this is a heartbreaking story, as many of these are, of course, Emily, because I've known Tina for some time now. I knew about this problem for a while, but she's been through so many appeals with this process that it's only now that we can reveal this situation, because in an interview that I've had with her, which will air in full tonight during the Farage programme at 7, she's explained how she's been regroomed, re-exploited, has had compensation money she earned from South Yorkshire Police taken off her, and the police have just not believed her case. They've ignored evidence, they've lost evidence. Really devastating. And I'd like to play a clip from that interview, which will be coming out later tonight.
Angry. Upset, angry. But for some reason, I felt like I had a bit of fight in me for it. Because I thought, I can't sit back and let this happen again. I can't let them just chuck me down and do this on my own again.
It was bad enough when you were 12.
It were horrendous.
But again, you were going through the same process.
Yeah.
You're being ignored and neglected by the police while you were being exploited.
And I just know that they're not They're not investigating things correctly. They're not.
Now, clearly she's been fuzzed out there. She wants to be anonymous. Is that because she still fears some of the perpetrators of the crimes against her?
Well, survivors of abuse are entitled to lifelong anonymity. She wants to retain that, quite rightly. But as you said, yes, she does fear for her life. This man, as we'll show later, has made threats against her life, her family's lives. There are firearms threats involved. We have some secret recordings at GB News that we'll show later. Really quite an extraordinary situation. But in response to our investigation, the South Yorkshire Police Detective Superintendent James Axe, the head of professional standards, said it's clear that Tina has suffered a horrendous ordeal, which will undoubtedly have a profound impact on her for the rest of her life. An internal professional standards process is underway in relation to aspects of the handling of this case. In addition, a criminal investigation into the fraud allegations remains live. This investigation is being reviewed holistically to ensure all of the wider matters raised are taken into consideration and assessed against a criminal threshold. While these investigations remain ongoing, we are unable to comment any further. We continue to support Tina and give her safeguarding advice and provide updates on the matters she has raised as this work continues.
Well, there you go. There's the statement from the police. We'll come back to this a little later on. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Lots more coming up, including what's been described as a car crash interview on housing from Angela Rayner. But first, let's take a look at the weather.
Despite the morning rain, it'll be a nice, warm, cosy day ahead. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Bit of a north-south split today with many northern areas fine, sunny, a little chilly, but in the south a lot of cloud, quite a few showers and a cold wind blowing. Storm Darragh may have cleared away and high pressure has moved in behind, but still a lot of isobars on the chart across England and Wales, suggesting a brisk and chilly wind, which is feeding in quite a few showers actually over eastern England. Showers coming and going over parts of the Midlands, maybe southwest England too. Most of Wales dry, certainly much of Scotland, Northern Ireland dry, and plenty of sunshine for central western Scotland and Northern Ireland. Temperatures here, single figures. In fact, most of us struggling to get to double digits, possibly in parts of the south, but it'll feel colder here actually because of that wind. So a pretty chilly feeling day, and quite rapidly tonight with clear skies. Temperatures are going to tumble across Scotland, so a frost forming. We'll dip well below freezing by morning. Also going to see some fog patches forming, probably not this evening, but as we run through the night, the fog is likely to thicken up, not just across central and southern Scotland, but also parts of Northern Ireland. Most of England and Wales keeping the cloud through the evening. The showers fading over the Midlands and southwest England, but we'll keep some going on well into this evening over parts of Suffolk, Essex, Kent, in and around the home counties. Away from the southeast corner, though, most will have a dry night. As I said, some fog thickening up across central and southern Scotland, Northern Ireland. Temperatures really plummeting here as well. We could get down to -5, -6, maybe a touch lower through some sheltered glens of Scotland. Towns and cities generally down to -3 or -4. Staying above freezing across most of England and Wales with more cloud. Not as many showers around tomorrow, but still quite a grey day for many. Still the odd shower across the southeast, and still quite a chilly wind blowing. So a cold feeling day tomorrow, even if you've got the sunny spells. Temperatures struggling, and for some where the fog sticks, we may not get above freezing all day.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pump.
It's our festive treat to you. Your chance to win an incredible £50,000 in tax-free cash. Our biggest ever Great British giveaway. What would you spend £50,000 on in the coming year? Spectacular holidays, a brand new car, home improvements, or maybe you'd just like to save it for a special occasion. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg and this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Lee Anderson's Real World. Fridays from 7 p.m.
So, how did you get into radio initially?
It's the old thing. You do discos.
Yeah.
Back in the days when you used to put needles on.
What sort of year we're talking about?
Oh, it was black and white.
Okay.
That's the closest you're going to get.
Beatles, Rolling Stones?
Yeah. Sort of later than... Yeah, sort of a bit later than that, doing discos. But then you sort of do a tape. I did a tape for BBC Radio Manchester, the local BBC station. And just one off, got a copy of that, edit. Yeah. Naively thought, everybody's going to send a tape to Piccadilly, which was the Manchester station, which was 73. And instead of that, a couple of years later, I sent a tape to Radio City in Liverpool, not thinking that everybody in Liverpool's going to be sending a tape there. And just a guy just went, I'm too good for this, doing the overnights, walked out, and my tape was on the top of the pile. And I got a phone call on a Thursday night, Thursday, the 12th of February, 76. Can you do 2 till 6 in the morning on Radio City in Liverpool? I thought it was someone of my pals.
And what was you talking about on that radio show?
It was an overnight programme, so it's music.
Yeah.
In those days, you didn't have much needle time, but clever devil here noticed that the BBC stuff was not needle time.
Yeah.
So I used to put like the Goons on and the Hancocks. So you've got half an hour and me and the security guy, Bert, on the door. We're the only two in the building. Yeah. I used to get in my car, put the Goons on, get in my car, dash down to the pier head, get a bacon butty, listening to it all the time, hoping that the record's not stuck, and then dashing back.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 1 o'clock on Monday, the 9th of December. I'm Charlie Peters.
And I'm Emily Carver.
Syrian refugees in Britain celebrate the toppling of the Bashar al-Assad regime. Will they be able to safely return to their country, or is there more danger to come?
Now there's a question. And in other news, rapper Jay-Z has been accused of raping a 13-year-old girl back in 2000 alongside Sean Diddy Combs. The 55-year-old denies the allegation and has described the lawsuit as a blackmail attempt. We'll have the latest reaction.
And the Housing Minister and Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner has struggled to explain how she'll house the 2.5 million migrants expected to arrive in Britain under Labour. She says there's plenty of housing that is there.
Yeah, Angela Rayner, she didn't sound like she knew what she was talking about, to be honest, in yesterday's interview.
That was a brutal experience to watch, quite frankly. But that's how we earn a living, isn't it? Putting those tough questions to politicians. So always a delight to see people sweating under pressure in such a manner.
I don't know, Charlie. Is it a delight? Is it a delight, or does it make you put your head in your hands and worry about the state of our country?
Concerning on one hand, but also good to have that sort of direct challenge. It may cause politicians to pause and think again about some of the proposals they've got. I think there'll certainly be a few alarm bells ringing in Labour HQ after that interview. But I
mean, with the housing, you can't say we don't have enough housing and we need to build 300,000 new homes every year of the government, and then say when it comes to migration, there's no issue.
Yes.
When it comes to housing. Oh, there's plenty of houses. OK, which one is it? Do we either need to build more houses or we don't?
Yes.
We either have enough for the British population or we don't.
Logically, it doesn't necessarily add up. But we'll have that clip later, and we can very much looking forward to your views and reactions to that. And you can post your comments and send them through to us to gbnews.com/your say. Plenty of you getting in touch on all the topics we've had so far today. The Syria discussion is popping off quite aggressively on your say, in particular on the questions about what it means for Britain, because that's really what we're interested in, especially on refugees potentially returning, the security concerns, and also a few of you asking about Shamima Begum. What might it mean for her? So we'll try and get through some of those later. But first up, it's your headlines with Sam Francis.
Very good afternoon to you from the newsroom at 2 minutes past 1. The top story this hour. Well, Germany has put a pause on all decisions on Syrian asylum applications, the first country to start wrestling with the fallout of the Assad regime's collapse in Syria. The move is reported to affect almost 50,000 applications from Syrian citizens seeking asylum in Germany. We're also hearing that Austria has now followed suit, halting more than 7,000 applications. 59-year-old Assad and his family fled to Moscow after being ousted by rebels over the weekend, and his departure marks a pivotal moment in Syria's civil war, sparking celebrations in many parts of the country. Well, Keir Starmer is among world leaders to welcome Assad's departure, calling it a good thing for the Syrian people, but says there still needs to be a political solution to secure peace.
I welcome the fact that Assad has gone. The Syrian people had to put up with his brutal regime for far, far too long. We're talking to regional allies. It's very important now that there's a political settlement, a political way forward, and it's very, very important that we emphasise that civilians and minorities must be protected in this process. But very, very pleased that Assad has fallen.
The UK government is also quickly reviewing its stance on Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, one of the rebel groups that helped topple the Assad regime, but still remains banned as a terrorist organisation. This morning, Cabinet Office Minister Pat McFadden said the government hasn't decided on its position, with Syria's future described as very uncertain. The group, once linked to al-Qaeda, played a key role alongside other factions in ousting Assad over the weekend. American rapper Jay-Z has dismissed allegations that he raped a 13-year-old girl alongside Sean Combs in 2000, calling it a blackmail attempt. The lawsuit filed in New York claims the pair drugged and assaulted the accuser after an awards ceremony in the United States while a female celebrity watched. In a statement, Jay-Z called the allegations heinous and accused the claimant's lawyer of exploiting the case for financial gain. The accuser is seeking damages, while Sean Combs, who faces separate charges, remains in custody. Jay-Z said his only heartbreak is for his family as they face public scrutiny over those claims. Keir Starmer is in the Gulf today on his first trip there as Prime Minister, aiming to secure billions in trade and investment. Downing Street said the Prime Minister's push for economic growth makes his meeting with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman essential. The Labour leader has previously criticised Boris Johnson for engaging with the Saudi regime, calling it going cap in hand from dictator to dictator. Number 10, though, insists Starmer will raise human rights issues during the talks. The trip, which also includes discussions with the UAE's president, aims to secure a free trade deal worth £8 billion annually. At least 2 people are dead and multiple missing after a huge fireball erupted from a building in Florence. Thick black smoke and flames were seen rising from the scene, prompting emergency services, including a helicopter, to rush to the area. The explosion, believed to have come from an oil depot, sent audible shockwaves through the area, with reports of serious injuries. Local authorities are urging residents to find indoor shelter and not go near that facility. The region's president has also confirmed that hospitals and emergency services are now on high alert. Here, health leaders are warning it's now or never to get a flu jab as cases are skyrocketing earlier in the season than ever before. Hospitals say they're grappling with a quademic of flu, COVID, norovirus and RSV, with flu hospitalisations quadrupling since last year. Children aged 5 to 14 are the worst affected, with fears of a wave of adult cases coming next. Officials say the flu vaccine is the best defence, urging anyone eligible to get protected before Christmas. It comes as the latest NHS figures show hospital beds are already 95% full. Travel chaos is continuing today after Storm Darragh battered the UK, leaving thousands without power and disrupting major train routes. Passengers on the West Coast Main Line and across Wales face cancellations and delays, with warnings to avoid travel in some areas until at least midday. The storm brought gusts of up to 96 miles an hour, killing 2 men and causing widespread damage, with engineers still battling to clear debris and restore power. Well, the Met Office says calmer weather is on the way, but temperatures will remain cold, staying in the single figures. And the King has revealed a quirky childhood memory Queen Elizabeth practised for her coronation, he says, by wearing her crown during his bath time. His Majesty shared the story in Coronation Girls, a documentary about Canadian women who attended the event in 1953. He also admitted feeling slightly anxious himself wearing the heavy St Edward's crown at his own coronation. The documentary, airing on Boxing Day, follows 12 women revisiting London where they were surprised by a royal visit from the King himself. Those are the latest headlines. I'll be back with you in around half an hour. Now, though, it's over to Charlie and Emily.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
OK, it's 1:08. This is Good Afternoon Britain with me, Emily, and Charlie Peters. Now, farmers are gathering today at the rural capital of food, that's Melton Mowbray, today to show support for the agricultural industry and to show some of their anger, I think.
Yes, quite a lot of that, because the group was set up this year to fight for the future of farming in response to the government's planned inheritance tax raid. Now, green charities, including the Wildlife Trust, have also shown their support for farmers, calling for the government to address England's broken agricultural sector. OK, well, is anyone listening? Joining us now is our GB News East Midlands reporter, Will Hollis. Will, you've been speaking to all sorts of people who've come down for this protest, this demonstration, whatever you want to call it. What exactly are farmers telling you then?
Good afternoon. Yes, there will be very few dinner tables this Christmas without a Melton Mowbray pork pie or a slice of Stilton cheese taking centrepiece. Here in the rural capital of food, farming is a direct contributor to the local economy, and that's why when we've got this national rejection of the inheritance tax push from farmers around the country, why now, after we saw that massive protest in London, here in the heart of the Midlands, Melton Mowbray is raising their voice. Let's speak to one farmer who's from around in the region. Tom Lamb, you've been speaking today at the protest, at the demonstration. Why are you here personally?
I'm here because the inheritance tax is going to hit our farm. So because the farm belongs to my father and he's not married, they say that the threshold is going to be 3 million, but because he's not married, it's only actually 1 million. So a 500-acre farm, it's obviously worth quite a lot of money. It's going to be, it's going to be very difficult to sort of transfer it into my name without either getting inheritance tax or getting clobbered by capital gains tax.
It's a 20% tax inheritance. There is parts of it that are agricultural property relief and business property relief, but ultimately you say that this is going to affect you. How do you respond to Labour saying this will only affect a small number of family farms?
Well, it's the business tax that we're on about. You know, it's all the machinery, it's all the crops, it's everything. So say if you've got a £500,000 combine, let's say I'm a farm contractor and I've got two £500,000 combines on finance, that's the tax completely gone. You know, whereas before we could claim business property relief and we'd be able to carry on, and we're not. I don't feel as I want to go out and spend the money on upgrading my machinery because it's going to increase the value of my business, well, my dad's business currently, and then when he passes it on to me, I'm then going to get clobbered with 20% on the crops in the store, the crops in the ground, the machinery and the farm infrastructure.
The government say they have to tax farmers, they have to tax the wealthiest landowners in this way because they've got to pay for public services. What's your response to that?
I looked at this and I see that Labour said, was it a £20 million black hole or something like that? So I thought, well, why is there a £20 million black hole? So I thought, let me do some research. The first thing I came across was the NHS pay subcontractors £300 to change one light bulb. And I thought, if someone came to my farm and I paid them £300 to change one light bulb, I'd be quids in. You know, why aren't they looking into this? Why are we paying that much money? Is it because there's a lot of red tape, you know, paperwork making them do that? It's ridiculous.
Farmers aren't fans of red tape and paperwork?
No, definitely not. Well, yes, sometimes we are, but, you know, it can make things more expensive, and it can obviously, you know, it makes things stand in the way of what we're trying to do.
Just tell me a little bit about the state of wider farming, because this is happening now in 2024. For the last few years when I've spoke to farmers, they haven't been very happy people, and then up to now they've become suddenly quite depressed about this. They seem to be having a really tough time over the last few years.
So, for example, over here we've got a tractor that says the wheat price, £170 a tonne. That was in 1990. Today we're in 2024, and what is the price of wheat? £170 a tonne. So it's exactly the same as from 1990 as it is to now. If any other industry, it would be rising and rising and rising. The cost of everything rises, doesn't it? If you go to, I don't know, if I went somewhere and bought something, the cost of it then is going to be far greater now than it is then. But with farming, it either goes down or it stays, it's like I say over here, it stays.
It hasn't risen with inflation, is what you're saying?
No, because then obviously food prices are going to rise, and you know we don't want to do that. But yeah.
Tom, just tell me, if you had one thing that you want people watching at home who aren't in a rural community like Melton Mowbray, who don't know any farmers, and will just go down to the local supermarket and get the best deal for their family, what do you want people to take away and understand about what's happening when the government is telling them at least that they need to tax farmers?
I would say people really need to buy British. You know, the problem is as well, people are importing food to the UK, which is also driving food prices down, because obviously Britain is the best in the world. Everyone always says Britain is the best farming in the world, and you know, that's why we have the red tractor certificate logo to
so
say
people know they're buying British.
To people know we're buying British products.
Tom Lamb, thank you so much for talking to GB News today. It's always great to hear from the farmers, from the people that are part of this Midlands Farmers Group, organising and making sure that the rest of the country hear how people in the Midlands feel against the inheritance tax.
Thanks, Will. Thanks for your report. Will Hollis there, our GB News East Midlands reporter, speaking to an angry farmer there, I think it's fair to say. But yes, I think we need to look this up. Is it costing the NHS £300 to change a light bulb?
Yeah, that's an interesting
If it is, that is a disgrace. I had a little look that dates back to 2002, this claim, but it may well be true. May well be true.
Yeah, well, Tom is concerned about that significant black hole, that £20 billion black hole that Labour is concerned about. And last week in this debate on the inheritance tax, the Labour MP Maya Ellis for the Ribble Valley said that actually bringing more farmers into paying inheritance tax to tackle that significant black hole would increase their profits overall, because they get better health services and also have lower energy prices. So Labour, as you just heard, Will Hollis putting that to Tom, very much saying that farmers will benefit from their own inheritance tax rate, which is an interesting line.
Did you see that spread in I think it was the Daily Mail this weekend? Rachel Reeves, I think it was a long interview. Anyway, the headline said, "I've got to be hard. I've taken away my mum's winter fuel payment," or something like this. I'm not sure that was the headline. Oh yes, I've had to be tough. Just ask my mum. I've cut her winter fuel payment. There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. Lots of fun going on always. Anyway, we're going to turn our attention to Syria, because it's been a tumultuous 48 hours. Bashar al-Assad has been ousted by rebels after 24 years in power.
Now, the Kremlin has now confirmed that the former Syrian president has been granted asylum in Moscow, and many are left asking what the toppling will mean for Syria and the region as a whole.
Yes, because here in Britain, Syrian refugees some of them are vowing to return to their homeland. They've been celebrating the rebels seizing control of Damascus. They've been celebrating the toppling of this dictator. A key commander on the ground urged displaced people all over the world to return home, saying a free Syria awaits them. But just what will they be returning to? Yes, of course, because Germany opened their borders to, what, 1 million plus Syrian refugees.
1.5 million.
This country's got tens of thousands. Other European nations have huge numbers of Syrian refugees. Will it be safer now in Syria for all those people to return to that country? Will they be encouraged to return back to Syria? Or actually, could these Islamist rebels actually make the country less stable than it was under Assad? Big questions, big questions.
Well, we're joined now by the former head of MI6, Sir Richard Dearlove. Sir Richard, thank you very much for joining us on GB News this afternoon. I want to start with the designation of HTS, the rebel group that's led this lightning charge on Damascus to topple the Assad regime. What do you make of this discussion to potentially remove them from the list of prescribed terrorist organisations?
Well, it wouldn't be the first terrorist organisation that had become, as it were, a politically acceptable movement. You've only got to look at what happened in Northern Ireland with negotiations eventually for the peace process with the IRA. So it is possible. But on the other hand, HTS has extreme Islamist roots linked with ISIS and Al-Qaeda. And I think one needs to proceed with caution in reassessing. Look, if it starts, let's say, development towards a pluralist political system in Syria, I think then maybe there'll be a case for reassessment. And I'm sure that the powers that be in the Cabinet Office will be looking carefully at this and considering the position. But look, you can always talk unofficially to these organizations. Covert diplomacy is a well-established method of exploring the options. And I think in a situation like this, you have got to be flexible and, as it were, make sure that the decisions you're taking are well-based.
Yes, because it seems there's this sort of vague hope among leaders in the West that hopefully this group will be more moderate than in the past. But is there any evidence to suggest that could be the case? Is the reason why potentially we're really looking at the prescription of this group is simply because they've been successful in toppling this Assad regime? Is there anything more to it than that?
Well, al-Jilani, the leader, has already said that he will, as it were, protect all the different minority groups in Syria. And, you know, Syria has a very mixed ethnic and religious composition. It's got a significant Christian population and different sects. Anyway, that's a complex makeup of the country. But he hasn't, I mean, he said this, he hasn't given any guarantees. I think one's got to proceed carefully and see what happens. Look, when dictators as fierce and horrible as the Assad family disappear, they leave behind them a political vacuum, and those vacuums have a tendency to implode. Look, we've seen it happen in Libya. We saw it happen in former Yugoslavia after Tito. We've seen it happen in Iraq. There are many precedents, and it would be surprising if Syria navigates this process successfully, but I think we all ought to start with a feeling of optimism.
Well, Sir Richard, you're an intelligencer, and what are the sort of indicators and warnings that you'll be looking at for signs that Syria could become a safe haven for terrorists? At this moment of great optimism, as you said, what are going to be the key moments where you think, OK, this is sliding into the sort of territory we saw with Afghanistan, Libya and several other West Asian nations that experienced regime change this century?
Well, I think the question is there going to be a bloodletting and revenge after the collapse of the Assad regime against those people who supported it? Or is al-Jilani and the people leading the opposition or the rebel groups prepared to come together with, let's say, the Kurds, with the Alawites, with the Christians? I mean, there are many different groups, and sit down and talk about how to create a political process from which a viable government will emerge. And it should become pretty clear in the next few weeks whether there's an option in that direction or whether we're just going to have an extreme Islamist movement that's going to wreak further havoc in the country. I mean, we just do not know. And obviously, after the fall of Assad, there's a certain euphoria, and we've seen that on the street. And there's an attempt apparently in Damascus in the last 48 hours to sort of police the streets, and that lands down to HTS, this leading rebel group. But I mean, we just don't know yet how it's going to evolve. And it's a very, very complex country. And of course, made more complex by its sort of catastrophic history over the last 40 to 50 years.
Yeah, and of course there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions of Syrians in Europe who have fled the regime and fled the danger and the war and the corruption and the brutality of the Assad regime, whether they'll be safe to make that return home. Lots of them have been coming out in the press, been speaking to the media, saying, you know what, this could mean that I can go home. I want to go home. I want to make my life back in Syria. But as you say, we've got to keep an eye on what happens next in that country. So, Richard Dearlove, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for joining us on the show, former head of MI6. Okay. Thank you. Really appreciate your insight on this. And just reading here that Assad, his family have bought up £20 million worth or something thereabouts of luxury apartments in Russia. It really is a safe haven for him and his family, isn't it?
Well, formerly London was a safe haven for his family. Asma al-Assad is his wife. They have a family home in a London suburb. I read in one weekend newspaper that they knocked on the door. There was no answer, funnily enough, this weekend. But yes, the al-Assad regime, they do have links all over the world.
Yes, we'll be living in Russian luxury by the looks of things. Anyway, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. We've got lots more coming up on today's show. Yes, Angela Rayner is receiving quite a bit of criticism following what's being called a car crash interview about housing and immigration. That's next.
Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan from 8 p.m.
You know, whenever I want to have a laugh, I will fire up a Ricky Gervais special on Netflix. He's funny, isn't he? Very politically incorrect. I might watch a vintage episode of Fawlty Towers if it hasn't been cancelled. Or I could just read up on the latest musings from the Welsh Labour government. And this week they have waged war on the countryside, which is apparently unwelcoming to British people of colour. Well, it's true, isn't it? I mean, those racial checkpoints in the Wye Valley are completely unacceptable. And the snowy bits of Mount Snowdon scream white privilege. Can you believe this story? It's proof, if you needed it, that Welsh Labour are barking mad and talking a load of shih tzu.
I think what's so interesting about this, I mean, this is an absurd question. This is ridiculous. Obviously, dogs and the countryside are not inherently racist. I think this entire connection between what is effective cultural Marxism in addition to what is effective socialism that is at the heart of Welsh Labour and many other hard-left groups in the United Kingdom.
I got to do a correction.
Go on.
Because it's not Welsh Labour. It was one thinky-tanky that did some research. I know it was taxpayer funded, but it was just a suggestion. Welsh Labour have not gone, yes, that's a good idea. This research, which I wholly agree is quite absurd, was done by interviewing the 4% ethnic minorities of Wales, and they came out with the fact that they don't feel welcome in green spaces because there are so many dogs, and that's how this was born. I mean, I don't know whether that makes it make any more sense.
And the fact that taxpayers are footing the bill for research like this is the real scandal. That we had this earlier conversation about the National Health Service, where all of our money is going and being wasted, and it is also being wasted on absolute nonsense like this.
GB News, the People's Chat.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, you didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
They catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 1:26. You're watching Good Afternoon Britain on GB News with me, Charlie Peters.
And me, Emily Carver. Welcome back.
Now, a survivor from the Rotherham abuse scandal has claimed that she has been let down by South Yorkshire Police during an investigation into allegations of coercion, fraud and violent threats. Now, Tina, which is not her real name, was exploited by abuse gangs as a child, but has exclusively told GB News in an interview that she has been regroomed as an adult and that the police have once again failed to support her.
Shall we have a little listen to a clip of your interview with her?
Let's go for it.
Angry. Upset, angry. But for some reason, I felt like I had a bit of fight in me for it. Because I thought, I can't sit back and let this happen again. I can't let them just chuck me down and do this on my own again.
It was bad enough when you were 12.
It were horrendous.
But again, you were going through the same process.
Yeah.
You're being ignored and neglected by the police while you were being exploited.
And I just know that they're not investigating things correctly. They're not.
Well, this is what we've heard time and time again, that you have victims of abuse at such a young age, hideous abuse, rape gangs, grooming gangs, whatever you want to call them. And then they continue to live in the same area, and it's possible that the perpetrator of the initial crime is out of prison or hasn't been to prison yet, is living in the same area. And the fear, and to hear it happen again after so many years.
Yeah, so
shocking.
This specific example involves this woman who we're calling Tina, receiving compensation, £50,000 from South Yorkshire Police, and her being coerced out of that money by an abusive businessman who's made gun threats and has also put her through another round of appalling sexual abuse. And Tina has reported this to South Yorkshire Police. She's brought forward all this evidence. They've not progressed the investigation. They've dropped it. And we're going to reveal tonight, exclusively at 7 p.m. on the Farage programme, in an extended interview, that South Yorkshire Police lost some of that key evidence. And I'm also going to bring forward some secret recordings we've obtained and the case notes to really show just how bad this failure was and why Tina is so very upset about this situation.
Well, it's fantastic that you're giving her a voice. Obviously, she's remaining anonymous for this, for her safety, because she's allowed to keep her anonymity, but her voice is being heard nonetheless. Now, South Yorkshire Police have released a statement. They say it's clear that Tina has suffered a horrendous ordeal, which will undoubtedly have a profound impact on her for the rest of her life. An internal professional standards process is underway in relation to aspects of the handling of this case. In addition, a criminal investigation into the fraud allegations remains live. Now, this investigation is being reviewed holistically to ensure all of the wider matters raised are taken into consideration and assessed against a criminal threshold. Now, while these investigations remain ongoing, we are unable to comment any further. We continue to offer Tina support and safeguarding advice and provide updates on the matters she has raised when possible as this work continues. OK, so there's James Axe, Head of Professional Standards. Now, lots of you have been getting in touch with us this afternoon. Grumpy Grandad again says, what gets me most of all with the farmers and the winter payment? They have given away more than that to climate projects abroad, and that's true. Shows perfectly British people don't come first anymore. This is a problem the Labour government have. There's a lot of people, I speak to a lot of people, as do you, every single day, as do we all. This sort of idea, and it's getting stronger and stronger, that the government cares more about, foreign affairs, cares more about the international elite, cares more about helping people from other countries than it does about, boring British people.
Sure. He's got a few nicknames so far, Sir Keir Starmer. Never Hear Keir is one I heard recently because he's overseas so much. Now, the government will say he's engaging in very important international engagements as part of that work. But as you just said, Grumpy Grandad putting forward that view, it does reflect a growing concern that I think the Labour Party will be very keen to push back against, that they're for more of a global issue than a national British concerns.
Yeah, James has been in touch. He says, after 14 dreadful years of lies and betrayal, the Conservatives in name only want us all to give them another chance. I simply have two words, naff off. I'm not sure exactly what that was in reference to. Perhaps it was our discussion about Suella Braverman's husband moving to the Reform Party. Now, Suella Braverman so far is sticking with the Conservatives, but a few of you have been in touch to say that Suella could possibly make that move.
Yeah, and I think people are discussing more widely the other parties at the moment. We're not having this two-party discussion so much. I mean, we were with Will Hollis at the top of the hour in Milton Mowbray for that farming situation, that protest going on. It's the Lib Dems who put forward possibly the most interesting part of that discussion recently with Tim Farron, the former leader, and also an MP up in the northwest, saying that actually working farms need to be exempt from this inheritance tax. He says, fair enough, you can go after those buying up farms in order to just escape inheritance tax for themselves. But actually working farms, family farms, people who've known that land for generations, they should be exempt. Again, these ideas, these discussions coming from Reform and the Lib Dems, not the main two parties.
No, I think that absolutely makes sense. You know, if you're just going to sell your land off to do whatever with it, then fine. You know, you can pay a bit of tax. But if you're going to pass it on for it to be a working farm to another generation when it's been in your family's hands for God knows how long, then you shouldn't be taxed.
Sounds like common sense to me.
Sounds like common sense. Sounds like... Also, it would be all a bit easier if we all thought that our taxes were being spent wisely, wouldn't it?
Yes, that would
Not
help.
being, you know, flitted away. Anyway, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. We've got lots more coming up on today's shows. Yes, households are having to wait weeks to have their bins emptied. Now, this comes as Labour's decision to abandon plans of fortnightly collections. Well, it's angered quite a few people. I want to know, how often do your bins get collected? Do you know?
I'm not going to say because people might work out where I live with that information. I definitely don't want that, but not regularly. Not regularly.
Not regularly enough.
No.
What's next?
Very good afternoon to you. It's just after 1:30. The top story, a day after the collapse of the Assad regime in Syria, the debate over the return of Syrian migrants is starting to intensify across Europe and the West. Germany has just become the first country to pause all decisions on Syrian asylum applications, with senior politicians there proposing offering Syrians €1,000 and chartered flights to return home. But the idea has faced criticism, with opponents warning it's premature to make such decisions. They argue that returns should only happen once Syria achieves lasting stability and democratic conditions. Well, the UK is also quickly reviewing its stance on Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, a rebel group that helped topple the Assad regime but remains banned as a terrorist organisation. Cabinet Office Minister Pat McFadden says the government hasn't decided on its position, with Syria's future described as very uncertain. The group, once linked to al-Qaeda, played a key role alongside other factions in ousting Assad. The wreckage of the plane blown up in the Lockerbie bombing is being moved to the US ahead of the trial of a man alleged to have helped make that bomb. Libyan national Abu Aguila Massoud faces 3 charges in the US for his involvement in the 1988 attack that killed 270 people, including 11 on the ground. The transfer includes parts of the plane's fuselage where passengers would have been seated and marks the start of evidence being sent from Scotland to the US. Scotland's prosecution service says the move is a significant step in their ongoing commitment to bring those responsible for the atrocity to justice. Massoud is set to stand trial in the US in May 2025. Jay-Z has dismissed allegations that he raped a 13-year-old girl alongside Sean Combs in 2000, calling it a blackmail attempt. The lawsuit, filed in New York, claims the pair drugged and assaulted the accuser while a female celebrity watched at the MTV Video Music Awards. In a statement, Jay-Z called the allegations heinous and accused the claimant's lawyer of exploiting the case for financial gain. The accuser is seeking damages while Sean Combs faces separate charges and remains in custody. Jay-Z has said his only heartbreak is for his family as they face public scrutiny over those claims. And at least 2 people are dead and multiple feared missing after a huge fireball erupted this morning from a building in Florence. Thick black smoke and flames were seen rising from the scene, prompting emergency services, including a helicopter, to rush to the area. The explosion, believed to have come from an oil depot, sent audible shockwaves through the area, with reports of serious injuries. Local authorities are urging residents to find indoor shelter and avoid the area. The region's president has confirmed the hospitals and emergency services are now on high alert as the number of injured continues to rise. Those are the latest headlines for now. Tom and Charlie up very shortly. First, though, a look at the financial markets.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Well, just before I hand you over to Charlie and Emily, here's a quick look at the markets for you. The pound will buy you $1.2782 and €1.2077. The price of gold, £2,080.60 per ounce. And the FTSE 100 is currently standing at 8,331 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Bit of a north-south split today with many northern areas fine, sunny, a little chilly, but in the south a lot of cloud, quite a few showers and a cold wind blowing. Storm Darragh may have cleared away and high pressure has moved in behind, but still a lot of isobars on the charts across England and Wales, suggesting a brisk and chilly wind, which is feeding in quite a few showers actually over eastern England. Showers coming and going over parts of the Midlands, maybe southwest England too. Most of Wales dry, certainly much of Scotland, Northern Ireland dry, and plenty of sunshine for central western Scotland and Northern Ireland. Temperatures here, single figures. In fact, most of us struggling to get to double digits, possibly in parts of the south, but it'll feel colder here actually because of that wind. So a pretty chilly feeling day, and quite rapidly tonight with clear skies. Temperatures are going to tumble across Scotland, so a frost forming. We'll dip well below freezing by morning. Also going to see some fog patches forming, probably not this evening, but as we run through the night, the fog is likely to thicken up, not just across central and southern Scotland, but also parts of Northern Ireland. Most of England and Wales keeping the cloud through the evening. The showers fading over the Midlands and southwest England, but we'll keep some going on well into this evening over parts of Suffolk, Essex, Kent, in and around the home counties. Away from the southeast corner, though, most will have a dry night. As I said, some fog thickening up across central and southern Scotland, Northern Ireland. Temperatures really plummeting here as well. We could get down to -5, -6, maybe a touch lower through some sheltered glens of Scotland. Towns and cities generally down to -3 or -4. Staying above freezing across most of England and Wales with more cloud. Not as many showers around tomorrow, but still quite a grey day for many. Still the odd shower across the southeast, and still quite a chilly wind blowing. So a cold feeling day tomorrow, even if you've got the sunny spells. Temperatures struggling, and for some, where the fog sticks, we may not get above freezing all day.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon. Hello, I'm Jules. Buckley, some queues either side of the M25 this lunchtime. The inside lane is closed off at junction 26 Waltham Abbey. A queue back to the Holmesdale Tunnel in the roadworks. There's a broken down lorry there. A queue for around about 4.5 miles anti-clock just towards junction 27. 2 lanes coned off before the Bell Common Tunnel for emergency repairs. And the southbound M11 as well before junction 7 Harlow. 2 lanes off and queues for emergency repairs there as well. And of course, many fallen trees across England and Wales, in particular Sherwell in Devon. The A39 is closed, as is the Headington Road in Oxford and the A44 in Pont Aylwyd. If you're heading for the trains in Wales and southwest England, again, many cancellations, so certainly worth checking before you set out on your journey. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Well, welcome back. It's 1:40. Our usual jingle didn't play out there. Anyway, Angela Rayner is receiving intense criticism following what critics described as a car crash interview where she appeared to make contradictory statements about housing availability in the United Kingdom.
Now, the Labour deputy leader highlighted a housing crisis before claiming there is plenty of housing already, but there's not enough for the people that desperately need it. Well, let's take a listen to a short clip of that interview.
All right, let me ask you about another element of this. On the present densities, you're going to add 3.4 million, or homes for 3.4 million people with your 1.5 million houses. On your own figures, we're also going to add to our population 2.5 million people over this same period. Are you content that more than 5 out of 7 new homes will go to immigrants?
Well, that's not the truth, and that's not the case.
What will happen.
Well, that's not the reality, because we've
where the 2.5 million immigrants that are in Rachel Reeves' budget figures going to turn up? Where are they going to live?
Well, there's plenty of housing in the UK, but the houses, especially social
hang on. You can't, on the one hand, say we've got to build this 1.5 million houses, and then say there's plenty of housing already.
There is plenty of housing, Trevor, already, but there's not enough for the people that desperately need it.
Right, OK, so there's housing for people who don't need it, but there's not enough for people who desperately need it. Anyway, joining us now is political commentator and property expert Russell Quirk. Russell, help us make sense of what Angela said. Have we got a problem with housing or not?
I'd love to help make sense of what Angela Rayner says. I don't think anybody could do that, Emily, frankly, because she makes no sense, does she? She was like a rabbit caught in the proverbial headlights yesterday with Trevor Phillips, and talk about someone that is not across her brief. And indeed, I'd argue this is where ideology and reality are starting to collide for this government now, on the basis that, yes, they want open-door immigration, even though they say they don't. Yes, they say they want to build lots and lots of homes. But actually, when you start to equate the number of homes they say they're going to build, which they won't, by the way, and I'll come back to that in a second, and the fact that the growing population of Britain, thanks almost entirely to net migration, will actually consume all those homes. When that reality is kind of faced by Trevor Phillips, in this particular instance, grilling Angela Rayner on a very, very kind of basic Diane Abbott kind of mathematics basis, really, we see that the whole approach of this Labour government, particularly on housing, crumbles before our very eyes. I mean, how Angela Rayner can say, well, actually, even though that we've pledged to build 1.5 million homes over the next 5 years, we don't really need to because there's loads of housing. I can tell you there is not loads of housing, particularly affordable homes, particularly social housing. Governments over the last 10, 15, 20 years have failed miserably to build not just adequate housing stock, but in particular, housing that is needed at the lower end of the scale, particularly social rent.
Well, Russell, going through that interview, there was also a particularly interesting line beyond this mathematical issue on migration and housing, where Angela Rayner did say that we need to prioritise people's needs over those of newts and bats, etc., and that the planning reform in this country is all too often prioritising wildlife over people living in the United Kingdom. That surely is a great opportunity for Labour to push forward some reform for building new housing.
Well, yes, you would imagine that there would be some common sense priorities applied there. And it's definitely true, it's definitely right that when it comes to ecological reports that are put in place before a planning application can be progressed, before it actually gets consented, yes, you do have to worry about all sorts of things, bats, newts and badgers in particular. Even though we spend time culling badgers in Britain, they're also a protected species when it comes to building housing developments, which seems rather kind of cockeyed to me. But the problem is that this government has almost been in power for 6 months. It promised that by the end of 6 months, the end of October, which would only be 3 or 4 months into its tenure, that it would have rewritten and distributed what they call the National Planning Policy Framework, which is effectively the textbook, the Bible, for kind of deciding on planning applications in Britain. That has still not been produced. It's still not landed, and we're nearly at Christmas. So, again, look, with all of this stuff, as we know, whether it's immigration, whether it's crime, and particularly now with housing, it's very, very easy to, make headlines out of the Downing Street press office, or to come onto shows like yours, or indeed Sky, or Talk TV, or whatever, and, to talk specifically in kind of mealy-mouthed headline terms about what they want to do. But I think what we should realise is, particularly with Angela Rayner at the helm and in charge of housing, is that there's a big difference between actually what you want to do and what you say you're going to do, and your ability to actually do it.
Well, this is perhaps why, Russell, we have so many consultations, reviews, task forces, etc., because as you say, it's, you can spend lots of time coming up with ideas and projections of what you want things to go and where you want things to go, but, it's harder to actually make the decisions. But yes, I mean, the bats and the newts and everything like this, I mean, the £100 million that was spent on that bat tunnel for HS2, I mean, it is bad. I think just lastly, I think the reason why Angela Rayner struggled so much in that interview was that she was flummoxed by immigration being brought into the discussion over housing. So she didn't want to be pinned down on, yes, all of these houses are going to go to new immigrants, but then she didn't want to suggest that they couldn't be housed. She just got a bit, she didn't want to be trapped.
So instead she just looked like she knew which way that conversation was going to go. The next question for Trevor Phillips, of course, would have been, well, OK, if you're admitting that all of these homes are going to immigrants, surely, therefore, you should commit properly. And Keir Starmer should have done in his 6 milestones, pledges, promises, whatever they were last week, to actually put a number on net migration, which, of course, he's refused to do. Look, they're in a complete and utter mess, and they can have as many relaunches, resets, and whatever as they like. This government, with no experience whatsoever across the front bench in anything, frankly, let alone business and housing, they are already revealing themselves as an incapable disaster. I think that's pretty clear to see.
Gosh, well, Russell. Strong stuff. Russell Quirk, property expert and political commentator. Great to have you on. Thank you very much indeed. It is, she just didn't want to be drawn on the immigration question, but it just ended up being a right mess, didn't it?
It did, but Emily, I'm increasingly of the view that it's the case now that immigration is part of our housing discussion. It was usually, no one used to raise it as being part of the same debate, but people are now more often in the mainstream say, yes, you did. There's no doubt about that. But in broader discussions now, people are going to have to face up to this. Politicians are going to have to face that question. Perhaps, as you say, the reason why she was so flummoxed is because maybe Anne Darragh hasn't caught up to the shifting mood, and people are recognising that we've got big problems with housing and also a booming population.
Well, you know what another tricky issue is that we're all faced with? It's our bin collections.
Yes.
Or are you not faced with them often enough? I mean, some places, apparently, you're not even going to get a fortnightly one. Might be lucky to have a monthly one. We're going to be talking about that next. In the meantime, do let us know how often your bin collection comes, because apparently Labour have scrapped some target for fortnightly, so there you go.
Yes, despite your council tax going up in many places. Well, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Lots more coming up on today's show, as you've just been hearing. Suella Braverman's husband has defected to Reform. Speculation is rife as to whether the former Home Secretary could follow suit. More on that shortly.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Joining me now is food historian and author of Christmas with Dickens, Pen Vogler. Pen, let's start with Christmas Carol. Did A Christmas Carol change Britain's view of Christmas?
I think it did, enormously. Before then, people were beginning to think, as they do now, that Christmas might be being a little bit commercial. It was too much food and drink, not enough kind of seriousness or not enough kind of love and family. And what Dickens did with A Christmas Carol was show people who were coming to the cities, who were kind of losing their rural history, a new way of celebrating Christmas, that a real, just a family could get together and love and kind of get around the table together. And whereas before, a lot of those kind of Christmas dishes would have been seasonal, lots of people would have eaten them at different times of the year, Dickens does two things. He takes the goose, which is what the Cratchits are going to eat, and he turns it to a turkey, much bigger, meatier, kind of more generous. And then he takes this thing that he never calls Christmas pudding in A Christmas Carol. There's no Christmas pudding. He only calls it plum pudding, and he anchors it to that day. And interestingly, after then, people start publishing recipes for Christmas pudding, and it starts getting its name, Christmas pudding, from plum pudding. And I think all of that really comes from A Christmas Carol.
You say becomes a Christmas pudding almost immediately after A Christmas Carol is published.
Yes, I mean, it's occasionally called Christmas pudding before, but not often. And then a very famous for the time, the kind of Delia Smith of her day, lady called Eliza Acton, publishes a recipe called The Author's Christmas Pudding in 1845. And we know she's a big Dickens fan because she sent a copy of her cookbook to him.
GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 1:51. You're watching GB News. Now, households are having to wait weeks to have their bins emptied after Labour quietly abandoned plans for fortnightly collections.
Yes, so Labour has given the green light for bin collections to take place every 3 weeks or even just monthly, potentially meaning rubbish will pile up on the streets, attracting vermin and the like. The government does insist that food waste will be collected from households weekly under its new plan for simpler recycling, meaning we won't all have to use 7 bins. Now, apparently, while everyone in the Commons was busy discussing assisted dying and that very contentious bill, this was sort of slipped in that Labour had actually dropped this fortnightly rule. So essentially councils could now just leave your bins for a month.
Yes, and that's what we're seeing from Bristol City Council, which is led by the Green Party. They're planning to cut back the bin collections for black bins from fortnightly to once every 4 weeks. Just as you said, Emily, that monthly collection. And of course, this comes as residents are facing council tax hikes of £110 next year after town halls were allowed to increase their rates by around 5%. So paying more for less.
I mean, how depressing is this? I mean, we're supposed to be a developed country.
Yeah.
Supposed to be the best country in the world, in my book, and we can't even get our bins collected on time.
Yeah.
I mean, half the time the bins man doesn't come till about midday, by which time the bins have been attacked by foxes mostly. It's all sprayed across the floor, across the road, the street, whatever. Unsightly, stinky. It's not great, is it?
No, and I live in an area where your bins are just left on the street. There isn't actually a collection bin in some places. You've just got plastic bags on the street, urban foxes cutting around and doing their business. You know, I used to live in Edinburgh when I was a student, and you had in the New Town, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, an entire part of the city, and they thought because of that kind of ancient classification, and it was a glorious part of the world, they wouldn't let you have bins on the street.
No bins at all.
You had to put your refuse into a sack, which you hung up on the rails. That was pretty good, actually.
A sack on a rail? A sack on a rail?
Yeah,
I've never seen such a thing. I did live in Bristol for a bit, and they had lots of bins. Mark says bin collection is every 2 weeks, alternatively for household and recycle, but after it's like they've dumped half of the load on the street. I know exactly what you mean. Half of the rubbish doesn't even go in the bin van. Anyway, we've got lots more coming up on today's show. Don't go anywhere. We're going to be talking about the situation in Syria and what it could mean for us here in the UK, whether there could be a raised terror threat. Stay with us.
A chilly start will give way to a lovely, warm afternoon. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Yes, it's time for your latest weather update here on GB News from the Met Office. A dry night for most places. Clear skies across Scotland and Northern Ireland will allow things to turn frosty and foggy, and there'll still be some rain across the southeast. A real north-south split with the weather. This chunky area of high pressure sitting across Scotland and Northern Ireland. That's where we've got the clearest skies. Frost forming pretty rapidly. Also, some thick fog patches developing. Meanwhile, the brisk breeze continues to bring quite a lot of cloud across the south, and plenty of showers for Essex, Suffolk, down across Kent, the London area, and even as far as Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. That cloud will keep the temperatures above freezing across the south, whereas further north, well below. Some sheltered glens of Scotland may get down to -10. There'll also be some fog across Scotland in the morning and Northern Ireland. Could be quite dense, that fog, particularly for the morning rush hour. Quite a lot of cloud across the Northern Isles, but dry here. It's further south, particularly the western side of the central belt, where that fog could be thick. Also, counties Fermanagh, Armagh and Tyrone also likely to have some dense patches of fog first thing in the morning. For most of England and Wales, it's a cloudy but dry start. Still a few showers, though, you'll notice, in and around the London area, crossing down through Kent. They'll still be there through the morning, slowly fizzling out. Not as many showers as today, certainly dry for the Midlands and eastern England. Brightening up too for northwest England, parts of North Wales should see some sunshine. Certainly most of Scotland and Northern Ireland looking to have a sunny day, although rain will trickle into Shetland later on. Temperatures are going to struggle, and some places will see that fog lasting all day across Scotland and Northern Ireland. If that happens, temperatures may not get much above freezing, and it's back for Wednesday morning. Really thickens up rapidly on Tuesday night. So again, dense patches of fog for Wednesday across parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland. England and Wales, again, predominantly cloudy, but apart from the odd shower on the south coast, most places staying dry. Temperatures, again, struggling in single figures, feeling cold.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Imagine getting a call to tell you that you've won £50,000 in tax-free cash, our biggest cash prize of the year.
Oh my God.
That's a big surprise.
Oh my God. This is amazing.
I'm in shock. That is absolutely fantastic.
Thank you.
For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home? Talking about? Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy. Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 2 o'clock on Monday, the 9th of December. I'm Emily Carver.
And I'm Charlie Peters.
Well, Syrian refugees in Britain celebrate the toppling of Bashar al-Assad's regime. Will they be able to now safely return to their country, or is there actually more danger to come?
Rapper Jay-Z has been accused of raping a 13-year-old girl in 2000 alongside Sean Diddy Combs. But the 55-year-old denies the allegation and has described the lawsuit as a blackmail attempt. We'll have the very latest reaction.
Yes, and Suella Braverman's husband has defected to Reform. We have exclusive pictures of him out campaigning already. Could the former Home Secretary follow her husband? Follow suit. Yeah, I'm interested, Charlie, to speak to Richard Holden this hour, because he's introducing this bill in Parliament tomorrow, and it all relates to cousin marriage, first cousin marriage. So essentially, if you share the same grandparents with someone, you shouldn't be allowed to marry them.
Yes.
I didn't realise there was so much of this going on, or at least I hoped it wasn't going on, but alas it is.
No, it's a big issue. Matthew Said has written about it in The Times a few times recently, focusing in particular on the situation in West Yorkshire. Now, in Bradford, they've got a big issue with health and birth defects as a consequence of cousin marriage, particularly first cousin marriage. And a lot of people are very worried that because this is a cultural practice, there's been a sort of an omerta around it, a bit of a silence about this issue because of political correctness. And a lot of commentators have said that this actually is very dangerous because you're harming children and you're harming families by not adequately tackling this problem. So, yeah, it'll be good to speak to.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, people say, oh, you know, we haven't talked about it enough. But, I mean, there have been documentaries about this. There have been huge amounts of research into this. We have had, you know, journalists going and looking at this issue. I guess it's just been put in the too difficult box to deal with from our weak politicians who are scared of talking about anything that might upset anyone or cause offence.
Well, now they'll be forced to talk about it because Richard Holden is putting this legislation forward. That will spark a debate. And if it passes, that could end first cousin marriage in quite a formal way. So we'll be very keen to hear what you think on that. By all means, please do send your views, post your comments on gbnews.com/your say. And we'll get to that discussion soon. But first, it's your headlines with Sam Francis.
Very good afternoon to you. Just coming up to 3 minutes past 2. Well, a day after the collapse of the Assad regime in Syria, the debate over the return of Syrian migrants is now intensifying across Europe and the West. Germany has become the first country to pause all decisions on Syrian asylum applications, with senior politicians there proposing offering Syrians €1,000 and chartered flights to return home. But the idea has faced criticism, with opponents warning it's premature to make such decisions. They argue that returns should only happen once Syria achieves lasting stability and democratic conditions. Well, Sir Keir Starmer is among world leaders to welcome Assad's departure, calling it a good thing for the Syrian people. But he says there still needs to be a political solution to secure peace.
I welcome the fact that Assad has gone. The Syrian people had to put up with his brutal regime for far, far too long. We're talking to regional allies. It's very important now that there's a political settlement, a political way forward. And it's very, very important that we emphasise that civilians and minorities must be protected in this process. But very, very pleased that Assad has fallen.
Well, the UK government is also quickly reviewing, it says, its stance on Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, a rebel group that helped topple the Assad regime, but still remains banned as a terrorist organisation. Cabinet Office Minister Pat McFadden says the government hasn't decided on its position, with Syria's future described as very uncertain. The group, once linked to al-Qaeda, played a key role alongside other factions in ousting Assad over the weekend. Staying with politics, and Sir Keir Starmer is facing criticism this afternoon for putting efforts to kickstart economic growth above human rights concerns as he meets Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Downing Street said the economy was Sir Keir Starmer's #1 priority, but insists he would still raise concerns about the Saudi government's human rights record. Campaigners are urging the Prime Minister to speak out on the cases of child defendants facing the death penalty and the murder of journalist Kamal Khashoggi. Meanwhile, the UK has struck new deals with Saudi Arabia in tourism, heritage and advanced materials, including the world's first graphene-enriched carbon fibre production in Manchester. In the US, American rapper Jay-Z has dismissed allegations that he raped a 13-year-old girl alongside Sean Combs in 2000, calling it a blackmail attempt. The lawsuit, filed in New York, claims the pair drugged and assaulted the accuser while a female celebrity watched. In a statement, Jay-Z called the allegations heinous and accused the claimant's lawyer of exploiting the case for financial gain. Jay-Z also said his only heartbreak is for the family as they face public scrutiny over those claims. The wreckage of the plane blown up in the Lockerbie bombing is being moved to the US ahead of the trial of a man alleged to have helped make the bomb. Libyan national Abu Aguila Massoud faces 3 charges in the US for his involvement in the 1988 attack that killed 270 people, including 11 on the ground. The transfer includes parts of the plane's fuselage where passengers would have been seated and marks the start of evidence being sent from Scotland to the US. Scotland's prosecution service says the move is a significant step in their ongoing commitment to bringing those responsible for the atrocity to justice. Masood is set to stand trial in May next year. At least 2 people are dead, multiple feared missing after a huge fireball erupted in a building in Florence. Thick black smoke and flames were seen rising from the scene this morning, prompting emergency services to rush to the area. The explosion, believed to have come from an oil depot, sent audible shockwaves through the area, with reports of serious injuries. Local authorities are urging residents to now find indoor shelter and not go near the facility. The Chancellor has called for a reset in the UK's relationship with the European Union, aiming, she says, to boost the economy and improve living standards. Speaking in Brussels today, Rachel Reeves highlighted the opportunity to strengthen ties with the EU, marking what she described as a milestone moment in post-Brexit relations. Rachel Reeves claimed it's in Britain's national interest to establish more normal trading relations with its closest neighbours. But while ministers insist on no return to the single market or free movement, critics argue her proposals lack ambition. Excuse me. And health leaders are warning it's now or never to get a flu jab, as cases are skyrocketing earlier in the season than ever before. Hospitals say they're grappling with a quademic of flu, COVID, norovirus and RSV, with flu hospitalisations quadrupling since last year. Children aged 5 to 14 are the worst affected, with fears of a wave of adult cases potentially coming next. Well, despite the latest NHS figures revealing hospital beds are already 95% full, Health Secretary Wes Streeting has said in just the last few moments that the government has prepared as best it can.
There are big challenges, particularly with flu, with COVID, with norovirus, and that's why, in terms of the operational leadership, ministers are taking a close interest, not just in terms of how the system is performing overall, but getting right down into local areas and sometimes individual cases to understand why it is some people are waiting so long and what we can learn, not just for this winter, but already starting to prepare for next winter too.
Those are the latest headlines for now. More coming up at 2:30 from the newsroom. Now, though, it's over to Charlie and Emily.
Right, OK, good afternoon, Britain. It's 8 minutes past 2. And now it's been a tumultuous 48 hours in Syria as Bashar al-Assad is ousted by rebels after 24 years in power.
Now, the Kremlin has now confirmed that the former Syrian president has been granted asylum in Moscow. And many are now left asking what the toppling will mean for Syria and the region as a whole.
Yes, over here in Britain, Syrian refugees, many have vowed to return to their homeland, pictured celebrating as rebels seized control of Damascus. Now, a key commander on the ground urged displaced people all over the world to return home, saying a free Syria awaits them. But just what will they be returning to if they do, in fact, return home? And what exactly will it mean for us here in the United Kingdom?
Well, we're joined now by the Executive Director at Migration Watch UK, Mike Jones. Mike, thanks very much for joining us on Good Afternoon Britain. Talk to me quickly about how this process actually works. How can a refugee in Britain from Syria make the decision to go back? What's set up to formalise that process?
Well, there aren't many barriers in terms of voluntary returns. That's fairly straightforward. I think the trickier issue is in terms of forced deportations. For example, if an illegal migrant arrives here across the English Channel or in the back of a lorry, there will be a number of legal hurdles to overcome if the British state wants to return those people. Because, Syria post-Assad is a mosaic, a smorgasbord of different groups controlling different parts of the country. There's no guarantee at all that Syria will have a stable centralized government. It could end up like Libya, a vortex of violence and hatred and destabilization. So legally speaking, forcibly returning people is going to be very difficult. But I can't see many hurdles or barriers in terms of voluntary returns.
Well, this is the difficulty, isn't it? You have a large number of people out on the streets celebrating the toppling of the Assad regime, but no one's truly aware of what happens next, really. These rebel groups, whether they will provide a more stable, a safer country for people to return to. But the numbers are absolutely extraordinary, aren't they? I mean, in this country, tens of thousands, but in Germany in particular, well over 1 million Syrians.
Yes, the numbers are quite large. You know, Germany, the Netherlands, the United Kingdom. I think initially you will have quite a few returns, people returning voluntarily from Jordan and Turkey. But in terms of Syrian migrants here in Europe, that's going to be a slow burn process because the situation in Britain is very stable. You know, we have a prosperous, high trust society. Syria could end up as a failed state. And obviously there are Syrians here who do want to return for cultural and family reasons. But if that country is going to end up as a failed state, then obviously they're going to stay here, regardless of whether they're, you know, anti-Assad or even sympathetic to the government that takes over.
Mike, I've just got a breaking line actually coming out of Germany in the last hour. The government there is pausing asylum applications for Syrians after the fall of this Assad regime. Some 47,000 applications from Syrians remain undecided, but they'll now be paused. We've also just heard from the head of the Bavarian Conservatives saying it's the right decision. We have to consider now how a greater number of people can be repatriated to their Syrian homeland. Germany, of course, over 1 million Syrian refugees in that country after Angela Merkel's decision to open the doors, as it were, in 2015. But they're taking steps already to adjust their refugee and asylum process with Syria after the toppling of this regime, it seems.
Oh, yeah, and that's quite sensible. Don't get me wrong on this. I don't think Britain is in a position to take more refugees from the Middle East. You know, the ideal solution for this is for the UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency, to work with countries in close proximity to Syria, rather than relying on European countries to take the burden. If you look at the academic evidence, refugee flows are strongly correlated with security threats, you know, whether that's crime or terrorism. And obviously it's very unpopular with the polis, with the general public. So there are very good national security reasons and democratic reasons for not allowing more people into your country.
I mean, you say that, but if the rebels who've taken over, who've toppled the Assad regime, prove to make the country less stable and less safe for people, and there's huge amounts of corruption or brutality, we await to see what happens. There could, in fact, be a massive push for more migratory waves from Syria, and there will be a lot of people in this country who say we should do our part, that it shouldn't be just down to the neighbouring countries.
That's the danger. If a strong centralised government does not emerge, then you've got a power vacuum, and you could have a situation like Libya, where you have different parts of the country governed by different warlords, and you know, that's fertile territory for smuggling gangs to operate. There's no coherent state to stop people from you know, leaving the country, and yeah, the refugee flows could increase, and obviously there'll be, you know, wailing and gnashing of teeth from the NGOs and the human rights lobby, who will insist that we take on our fair share, inverted commas. So that's a huge danger here.
Well, Mike Jones, thank you very much indeed. Executive Director at Migration Watch UK. These things are never simple, are they?
Well, Emily, I'm just seeing here that one of these German politicians making an argument for a change in their asylum process is arguing this morning, this is from the centre-right, the centrist, the CDU, the Christian Democrats, saying that they would argue for a payment of €1,000 to charter planes per Syrian refugee to start the process of returns. That debate starting in Germany already. Of course, they have so many more Syrian refugees and migrants than any other European nation, but clearly a very intense reaction to that situation in Germany already.
Well, yeah, because you had Angela Merkel adopt quite an extreme position of essentially saying anyone can come. That's basically practically what she said, isn't it? Practically what she said, and 1 million plus people did come. But I guess there's an election coming up, isn't there, in Germany?
Yes.
And they may want to appear very strong on immigration to try and get some of those votes, particularly as the Alternative for Deutschland is doing so well over there. But that's a similar thing is happening in Sweden, isn't it? In Sweden, they're paying for people to leave, and they've had the first time of net outward migration, haven't they?
Yes, and I think also it's important to consider this situation in Germany, this debate, insofar as the fact that they've also managed to do some deportations to Afghanistan. They don't even have a relationship with the Taliban regime. Of course, like Britain, they're going to look at how this HTS group is going to develop. They're concerned about human rights violations. As we've heard from so many security experts on our programme today, this could get even worse. Andrew Fox and Sir Richard Dearlove saying, terror groups might not necessarily be wonderful at government. So that could change. But Germany already looking at deportations, or at least supporting repatriation with charter flights.
Oh dear, a lot to think about today, isn't there? But in other news, Suella Braverman's husband, Ryle, has defected from the Conservatives to the Reform Party.
Now, in this exclusive footage, he's clearly not wasting any time and has been seen campaigning for his new party already. There he is, on the left in the background, second from the left. He's campaigning with Darren Selkus, who was the Reform candidate in the last general election in the Hertsmere area in Hertfordshire, near the Braverman family home. And as you can imagine, speculation is rife as to whether the former Home Secretary will follow her husband into Reform.
She said, I don't get told by my husband what political party I should be a part of, and vice versa. So there you go. Shall we speak to political correspondent at The Spectator, James Hill, on this? James, has this sent shockwaves through the political establishment or just the Braverman household?
I think it's more a warning shot than a shock against the whole political establishment. But really, I think that this is very much the latest indication and a pattern we're seeing, which is that long-standing Conservative activists are now crossing the floor and going to Reform. And I think that his comments today, Mr. Braverman's comments about defecting, saying it's nice to believe in something again, are ones that will resonate with a lot of Conservatives who right now don't know what to believe and which party to support.
And James, looking at this process, you said they don't know who to support, who to back. There's a big debate going on about whether or not the Conservatives are reacting fast enough to some of the strong stances that Reform are taking. Saw Richard Fuller making similar comments like that over the weekend, saying we need some clarification on our positions. Do you think that's why some prominent Tories, like Tim Montgomery, for example, the former editor of Conservative Home, are moving over towards Reform, just was that clarity at this very intense period of political debate?
Yeah, there's a bit of a divide within the Conservative Party. I think the majority are willing to go along with Kemi Badenoch, who says that, we need time to rebuild after a devastating defeat, the worst in the party's history, worse than 1906, worse than 97, and actually rebuild and look at everything in terms of these policy commissions she set up and say we need to take some time to understand from first principles. Then there's a minority view which is saying, look, hang on a sec, we're no longer the most interesting party on the right of British politics. We're going to get overtaken by Reform if we don't come up with some narrative. And therefore, even if we're not sort of coming up with huge planks and swathes in the manifesto every single week, we ought to be the ones taking the fight to Labour every week. The benefit for Reform, what Reform has, which the Conservatives don't, of course, is that they don't have a record in government to stand on. The Reform Party can go out there and say, well, we've never been trusted, may as well give us a go. We're not the same old Tories. We've never had a chance to put ideas into practice. And for some Tories, I think, who look at the last 14 years of the Conservative government, they'll be looking at thinking they're old, they're discredited, they had their chance, I'm going to give something else a go.
What are your thoughts on the Reform Party's prospects, just in general? Do you think there's a ceiling on the support that they could gain in the country? Sort of this 25%, is that the limit, do you reckon?
Well, there was always a sense with Farage, perhaps, that he had a high floor but a low ceiling, in that he would guarantee you 15% of the vote, but would he tap out at 20% of the vote? What we're now seeing is actually polls coming forward say, there's only one this week, but say gave the Reform Party 24% of the vote. And now if these are part of a consistent pattern, that is a really interesting thing and the factor in the change of the UK. For so long, we've had two parties dominating everything, and yet now the two big parties are polling less than 50% of the vote. And if Reform gets 25, 30%, particularly in those locals, particularly in the Welsh and Scottish elections next year, and suddenly they become, in some parts of the country, the main opposition, what you can then see see is the brute logic of first past the post suddenly going from being an enemy of reform into being an ally and actually flipping them and making people get elected, just like James McMurdoch in Essex. With 31% of the vote, you could see that elsewhere across the country, Emily.
Interesting. James Hill, thank you very much indeed for your time, political correspondent at The Spectator. Yeah, I do think come the next election there'll be some kind of agreement, don't you think, between the Conservatives and Reform? Otherwise, it'll just split the right-wing vote, or whatever you want to call it.
Well, yeah, and I'm sure that people in Reform are, consistently saying, we're not possibly considering that. And you've just heard some pretty compelling views and analysis from James there about how actually 31% was enough for one of their MPs, so they might try their luck. They'll see how they're doing 4 years down the line. I imagine this sort of chat of an alliance at this stage, possibly a little bit early.
Yeah, and for how long is Kemi Badenoch going to be able to say, we need to have an internal discussion, we need to brainstorm ideas, we need to actually understand what our party is about when it comes to the Conservatives before she actually has to, come up with some clear, distinct policy proposals? Because it's all well and good having philosophical debates, isn't it, about who you are as a party, but at some point you need to take it to the opposition in a very strong fashion.
Yes, and ideology does actually and should breed ideas about policy. You can't just, be in the clouds the whole time. You've got to discuss the issues that people care about in a practical manner.
We're never off in the clouds here at Good Afternoon Britain, are we?
No.
Never at all. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Lots more coming up on today's show. Yes, the Midlands farmers have gathered today in Melton Mowbray, the home of the pork pie, or so I'm told, to show support for the agricultural industry. We're going to be hearing from some of the attendees after this. We're also going to be speaking to Richard Holden MP on first cousin marriages. Don't go anywhere.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg and this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Well, unfortunately not. We're seeing a lot of, as you mentioned, delayed treatment, non-treatment. And I think that you have to remember that it takes 5 years to train a dentist, right? To get them through college and then into the VT training. So unfortunately, none of this can be done overnight. And we are seeing a lot of long-term issues. Like Eamon mentioned, his mother hadn't seen the dentist in a number of years and then needed a number of teeth taken out. And so we're seeing people not go for treatment early enough and then leading to more extensive treatments like root canals and extractions that are more severe but also more costly.
But Vanessa, I always look at this and think, why is there a problem? My view is, surely the state should sponsor anyone who wants to be a dentist and pay for their training in return for that person signing up to work for the NHS for a number of years, 8 years, 10 years, whatever, then they can do what they want. Why don't we have a system like that?
Well, that would be an excellent solution and definitely something that we could look at in the long term. I think that when you think about people who are going into dentistry, I know a lot of my colleagues and stuff went to Australia to travel and to explore straight after college as well.
And avoid paying back the debt.
Yeah, and the rising population, I suppose we're probably just not producing as many dentists to target and to treat us as a nation efficiently.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 2:25 on Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Now, Midlands farmers have been gathering today at the rural capital of food, that's right, Melton Mowbray, to show support for the agricultural industry. Now, the group was set up this year to fight for the future of farming in response to the government's inheritance tax raid.
Yes, they are very much mobilising. Now, green charities, including Wildlife Trust, have also shown their support for farmers. They're calling for the government to address England's broken agricultural sector, in their words. There you go, some pictures there.
Well, joining us now is the GB News East Midlands reporter Will Hollis, who's been at this protest demonstration all day, speaking to plenty of farmers. Will, who have you got with you now?
Good afternoon. Yes, Melton Mowbray, slap bang in the centre of the country. A Melton Mowbray pork pie, slap bang in the centre of your Christmas dinner table. Of course, Stilton cheese as well plays a big role of the what happens here in the rural capital of food. And while we have protests around the country against the inheritance tax introduction in Rachel Reeves' Labour budget, here in the Midlands, in particular agricultural areas, the protests are now spreading to the towns as well. Let's speak to Simon, who's the chair of the Midlands Farmers Organisation, and we've got as well Sam, who's here as well, a farmer that's supporting it. What's been the reaction from the community here today?
It's been an incredibly positive reaction, to be honest with you, Will. Folks have come out in numbers. It's been well-natured, and we're all sort of singing from the same hymn sheet. No, it's been a fantastic reaction. I'm proud. I'm genuinely proud of the farming community coming out. It's sad that the only reason that we've have had to come out is because of Rachel Reeves' budget, but I'm proud that we have come out in such numbers.
There's been around 40 tractors circling Melton Mowbray today. Why does this matter? What are the complaints from farmers like you?
Main complaint is to do with inheritance tax. I mean, me speaking personally, on my own farm, come the day of demise of my father, I'll be hit with what looks to be an £800,000 inheritance tax bill. I haven't got that money to pay. No chance of paying that whatsoever. The government have very kindly said that I can pay that in 10 years interest-free, which is fantastic. Thank you very much, Rachel Reeves. Really appreciate that. The issue is, though, I'm not making £80,000 a year. I'm not even making £40,000 a year. I make £22,000 a year. So I've got to find £80,000 plus, whatever I need to live on. It's just not feasible. It isn't feasible, and it's not fair.
The government say that they need to tax farmers, and they need to tax particularly wealthy landowners who are buying up farmland because they need to pay for public services. Is that not a fair argument?
I mean, it would be a fair argument. However, the way that she wrote this budget, it doesn't actually stop the rich that are trying to shelter from inheritance tax from going out and buying more land. There's still an incentive there for them to go and buy land. This is hitting the small to medium sized family farm, pure and simple. They need to write a budget that is going to affect the rich, and that's their argument, is to affect the rich. The other thing as well is, it's meant to make £500 million. Then why on earth did the government send £536 million off for foreign agricultural projects? The government are not bothered about farming, and we need to make sure that they are.
Sam, as a dairy farmer, somebody who contributes to making Stilton cheese, that's where your milk goes to from time to time. How do you feel about the introduction of inheritance tax as well as the wider budget?
It's dismal from them. You say from time to time producing milk, it's every single day. We're out there slogging it out in whatever system you use. And if I'm hit with £200,000 to pay on our small farm, it's not there. We can't do it. We don't get enough remuneration from our food that we sell to repay these inheritance taxes.
You're two Midlands farmers. How important is agriculture to this part of the country? To people that are down in Devon or in Wales or Scotland, how important is agriculture to this part of the region, to the country?
It's a big part. Here we are in Melton Mowbray market town. We've got the cattle market. All farmers feed in from miles around, bring their cattle and sheep there to sell. And that passes money down into the town here to other smaller businesses.
And if you had one thing that you wanted non-farming communities, people who never go onto a farm, who have no connection to farming whatsoever, what is the one thing that you want them to know about the what's happening with the inheritance tax?
I think I just want you to know that we supply your food. That's the reason. And if you want to pay more money for your food in the supermarket, we can pay more taxes, and we'd be happy to do that. Please pay.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Simon and Sam, two Melton Mowbray farmers here. There was a big protest, about 1,000 people or so down from this small part of the country. A couple of weeks ago, we saw 10,000 plus people outside Parliament raising their voices. And because we've had no changes, no reverses, which is ultimately what the farmers want from the government around an introduction of inheritance tax, I don't think this will be the last protest, small or large, that you'll see.
No, I don't think so, Will, but it's interesting to get the perspective from where you are, not just in Westminster. Farmers are up in arms across the country. Thank you very much indeed, Will Hollis there, reporting for us on that farmer protest. Yes, we are expecting a rather large protest, actually, this Wednesday, I believe.
That's right.
There may be tractors also descending on the capital, which is rather controversial, because the last one, people didn't bring the tractors, did they? The National Farmers Union said, you know what, leave the tractors at home, guys. You don't want to cause too much of a hoo-ha.
Yeah, there's a balance, isn't there? With a lot of people trying to pull with protests these days. They don't want to be as disruptive as some of the other groups that are conducting big protests.
Like the Just Stop Oils.
There we go.
Like the Extinction Rebellions.
They want to have, legitimate, organised protests which are regulated and, supported by the police, not turning up to block traffic. Tractors, they do get in the way in Zone 1.
I'm looking a bit short. I'm
Are you falling down?
Looking a bit short.
These things
anyway, we've got lots more coming up on today's show. This is Good Afternoon Britain, of course. What have we got? We've got US rapper Jay-Z. He's hit back at a lawsuit which alleges that he, along with Sean Diddy Combs, drugged and raped a 13-year-old girl at a party back in 2000. Now, he denies the allegation. He's calling it a blackmail attempt. We're going to have more on that after your headlines. We're also going to be discussing first cousin marriage. A new bill's being proposed to just ban it. Just ban it. That's after your headlines with Sam Francis.
Very good afternoon to you. 2:32 exactly. The top story. Well, a day after the collapse of the Assad regime in Syria, the debate over the return of Syrian migrants is now intensifying across Europe and the West. Germany has become the first country to pause all decisions on Syrian asylum applications. Senior politicians there are proposing offering Syrians €1,000 and chartered flights to return home. But the idea has faced criticism, with opponents warning it's premature to make such decisions. They argue that returns should only happen once Syria achieves lasting stability and democratic conditions. Sir Keir Starmer is among world leaders to welcome Assad's departure, calling it a good thing for the Syrian people, but added there still needs to be a political solution to secure peace.
We welcome the fact that Assad has gone. The Syrian people had to put up with his brutal regime for far, far too long. We're talking to regional allies. It's very important now that there's a political settlement, a political way forward, and it's very, very important that we emphasise that civilians and minorities must be protected in this process. But very, very pleased that Assad has fallen.
As we were just hearing from Charlie and Emily, Jay-Z, the American rapper, has dismissed allegations that he raped a 13-year-old girl alongside Sean Combs in 2000, calling it a blackmail attempt. The lawsuit filed in New York claims the pair drugged and assaulted the accuser after the MTV Video Music Awards while a female celebrity watched. In a statement, Jay-Z has called the allegations heinous and accused the claimant's lawyer of exploiting the case for financial gain. Well, Jay-Z said his only heartbreak is for his family as they face public scrutiny over the claims. And the wreckage of the plane blown up in the Lockerbie bombing is being moved to the US today ahead of the trial of a man alleged to have helped make the bomb. Libyan national Abu Aguila Massoud faces 3 charges in the US for his involvement in the 1988 attack that killed 270 people, including 11 on the ground. The transfer includes parts of the plane's fuselage where passengers would have been seated and marks the start of evidence being sent from Scotland to the United States. Scotland's prosecution service says the move is a significant step in their ongoing commitment to bring those responsible for the atrocity to justice. Massoud is set to stand trial in May 2025. That's it from me for this afternoon. Sophia Wensler will have a full roundup at 3 o'clock, and Charlie and Emily will be back with you straight after this short break.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, Sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Bit of a north-south split today with many northern areas fine, sunny, a little chilly, but in the south a lot of cloud, quite a few showers and a cold wind blowing. Storm Darragh may have cleared away and high pressure has moved in behind, but still a lot of isobars on the charts across England and Wales, suggesting a brisk and chilly wind, which is feeding in quite a few showers actually over eastern England. Showers coming and going over parts of the Midlands, maybe southwest England too. Most of Wales dry, certainly much of Scotland, Northern Ireland dry, and plenty of sunshine for central western Scotland and Northern Ireland. Temperatures here, single figures. In fact, most of us struggling to get to double digits, possibly in parts of the south, but it'll feel colder here actually because of that wind. So a pretty chilly feeling day, and quite rapidly tonight with clear skies. Temperatures are going to tumble across Scotland, so a frost forming. We'll dip well below freezing by morning. Also going to see some fog patches forming, probably not this evening, but as we run through the night, the fog is likely to thicken up, not just across central and southern Scotland, but also parts of Northern Ireland. Most of England and Wales keeping the cloud through the evening. The showers fading over the Midlands and southwest England, but we'll keep some going on well into this evening over parts of Suffolk, Essex, Kent, in and around the home counties. Away from the southeast corner, though, most will have a dry night. As I said, some fog thickening up across central and southern Scotland, Northern Ireland. Temperatures really plummeting here as well. We could get down to -5, -6, maybe a touch lower through some sheltered glens of Scotland. Towns and cities generally down to -3 or -4. Staying above freezing across most of England and Wales with more cloud. Not as many showers around tomorrow, but still quite a grey day for many. Still the odd shower across the southeast, and still quite a chilly wind blowing. So a cold feeling day tomorrow, even if you've got the sunny spells. Temperatures struggling, and for some, where the fog sticks, we may not get above freezing all day.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon. Hello, I'm Jules Buckley. Issues in Oxford this lunchtime. The A34 southbound is closed at the Hinksey Hill interchange. Long queues back towards the Pear Tree interchange, so heading back past Botley at the scene now of a serious collision. Issues for the clockwise M25. A lane shut at 26 Waltham Abbey. A broken down lorry being recovered in the roadworks there. Heavy back past 24 Potters Bar. Not too far from there. Anti-clock after 27. 4.5 miles worth of queues. 2 lanes shut for emergency repairs, and also anti-clock before Wisley at 10, 2 lanes out. A collision causing delays back towards the M3 in the roadworks, and 2 lanes shut on the southbound M11 just before Harlow at 7. The queue 2.5 miles for emergency repairs following an earlier van fire. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
OK, good afternoon, Britain. It's now 2:38. Now, during Advent, as we count down to Christmas Day, we're hearing from church ministers across the country. Now, each day they have a special message for you to celebrate the festive season. Shall we have a listen to today's?
Yes, please.
The GB News Advent Calendar, Day 9.
Hello, my name is Marjorie and I'm a minister in the north of England. Most of Britain is familiar with the fact that we have a king, a monarch. In 2022, at the age of 73, King Charles ascended to the throne. Jesus Christ is the only person to have actually been born a king, and at Christmas we celebrate his arrival. In Matthew's Gospel, chapter 21, Jesus himself, towards the end of his life, declares his kingship. Behold, your king has come, riding on a donkey, gentle. Yes, his power is completely different to our understanding of power in the world. He did not ascend to power, he simply is power. And what an example of power he gave to us. And that is why, 2,000 years later, many people across our world on a daily basis continue to turn to the person of Jesus Christ. He will not overpower you, but he will empower you to know God. And so we invite you individually to know the presence and the power of Jesus at this Christmas time. and may Great Britain, the United Kingdom, recognise, behold, your king is coming.
Starting to feel a bit festive,
yes,
Charlie.
It's working on me.
Starting.
You can see all of our special Advent messages on Christmas by visiting gbnews.com/Advent. Merry Christmas.
Yes, and Merry Christmas. Now, there is plenty more coming up on today's show with me and Charlie, but Martin Daubney is up at 3 o'clock. Now it's time for him to tell us what he's got on for us. Martin, what's on your agenda then?
Good afternoon, guys. Well, has Sir Keir Starmer been given a gift horse? 17,000 Syrian refugees in the United Kingdom came here in their darkest hours. Well, now the Assad regime has been toppled. Maybe it's time to repatriate them. We can even help them on their way by laying on some flights. 17,000 refugees who now no longer need to be hiding in Britain. Their country is safe. The war is over. Is it time for the Syrians to go home and rebuild their country? Isn't that the best place for them? And a bloke from Newcastle has caused a viral sensation by aiming for a Christmas #1, his winter fuel allowance protest song by a band called Sir Keir and the Granny Harmers. I think you can see where it's going there. It's called I'll Be Freezing This Winter. It's a take on Mud's classic I'll Be Lonely This Christmas, and I've got the creator of that sensational track on my show later on today. And on the same point is Christmas being slowly cancelled in schools. I wrote about this for GB News. I've had thousands and thousands of people completely agreeing. Nativity, carols, references to Christmas, anything being removed from British schools. Meanwhile, if you dare to say let's not celebrate Ramadan or Eid, you get a call from Prevent. Is Christmas being cancelled in our schools? All coming up 3 till 6.
Yeah, Martin, I read your piece and, you know, I don't cry as much as you, Martin, but it did bring a tear to the eye. It did bring a tear to the eye. Changing carols on the green to singers on the green. You can't even say carols. I mean, it's so sad. A nativity could be a thing of the past in some areas of the country, at least. Martin, chin up. I'm sure your show will be fantastic. Martin Daubney there from 3.
Right then, moving on, what have we got next? Well, the US rapper Jay-Z has hit back at a lawsuit which alleges that he, along with Sean Diddy Combs, drugged and raped a 13-year-old girl at a party in 2000. Now, in a statement, Jay-Z, whose real name is Sean Carter, has dismissed the legal action as a blackmail attempt.
OK, well, joining us now is showbiz reporter Stephanie Saatchi. Stephanie, where are we with this? What's the latest?
Well, you know, it was quite a bombshell overnight, Emily, to see these reports that Jay-Z had been named in a civil suit for allegedly raping a 13-year-old girl at an after-party for the MTV Video Music Awards in 2000. So we're talking about an incident which may have occurred 24 years ago. What we're trying to find, it's not really that surprising, Emily, because P. Diddy, he's got about 13 cases against him, all sexual assaults and different other offences. It was bound to be one of his close alliances to be named in one of these cases. And unfortunately, it was for Jay-Z, who's been renamed in this refiled case, which happened yesterday. Most celebrities would like this kind of stuff to go away and sweep it underneath the carpet. They may even pay in a settlement, but not Jay-Z. He's not taking these accusations lying down. He says, you know, it's a blackmail plot. He's saying if this crime really did happen, a horrific crime like this, why are we taking it to a civil court? I would rather we take it to a criminal court instead. As we know, Jay-Z is one of the most wealthiest musicians in hip-hop, and if not in the music industry. And something which has been really heartbreaking for him is that he's got a young family now who are going to have to read these accusations, but he is coming out swinging and he is not giving in to cancel culture on this one.
Stephanie Saatchi, thank you very much for that summary. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. There's lots more coming up on today's show. We'll be speaking with the former Conservative Party chairman Richard Holden as he introduces legislation to the Commons which could put an end to first cousin marriage. He's joining us right after this break. Don't go anywhere.
I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
The way in which children are being driven online because we're not taking them seriously offline. And what we're tending to do is seeing the problems entirely on the social media forgetting the fact that we've given up on children being able to work independently and play independently outdoors. We've basically created a world where the digital bedroom has become this go-to area for a lot of young kids. We've given up on old-fashioned parenting, where we try to cultivate their resilience. And now we blame everything, all the problems that occur online. You have to remember that if you take something like bullying, bullying doesn't have to only take place online. It happens all the time, offline, in everyday life. But yet we only see the problem on the social media. And there's this obsession with the social media where every single problem that afflicts childhood is blamed on it. And that distracts us from actually understanding what we're doing wrong with children. So for me, and I hate when I see children with digital technology, when I see them with smartphones. I'm not a fan. I'm much more concerned about the fact that parents use their digital phones when they're having dinner with their kids and giving very bad examples in relation to that. But the real problem, it seems to me, is offline, and that's why we got to crack the issue. So for me, the banning issue is entirely a headline-grabbing political gambit. And I think that we should be much more focused on the real problems rather than delude ourselves that anything will improve.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss my big opinion. Mark meets and my take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 2:47. Now, former Conservative Party chairman Richard Holden is introducing legislation to the Commons putting an end to first cousin marriage in a bid to tackle forced weddings. Now, Mr Holden will propose changes to the law with the goal of preventing forced marriages and negative social control.
OK, well, joining us is former Conservative chairman Richard Holden. Richard, just to clarify, this is about cousin marriage, first cousin marriage, rather than forced marriages, or is it both in one?
So it's first cousin marriages. We already have legislation around forced marriage, but there is an issue around first cousin marriage, because if your grandparents are the same as your spouse's grandparents at your wedding, then that's obviously got some big issues around it when it comes to control as well. So it's one of those issues, and it cuts across both in terms of genetic factors and real concerns around roughly a doubling of the rate of issues for children of that relationship, but also there are clearly issues around control and within a relationship if you share the same grandparents on your wedding day.
Now, Richard, why are you only proposing a ban of first cousins? Because second cousin marriages still cause major issues with clannishness, with health problems, other ethical and health issues. And also, this could improve the NHS, reducing extremism, keeping our political associations freer. Why just first cousins, then, in this ban?
Well, first cousins is the first step, and particularly when it comes to those issues, those medical issues, there are really clear linkages there. As I said, sharing the same set of grandparents, real issue. obviously, the further it gets away, the fewer issues there are in that regard. And also, obviously, the further it gets away, that control element, which you mentioned in your interview at the start of the interview, also weakens as well. I think first cousin marriage, that's where I think we've got to start. It seems to be the biggest issues, both in terms of control and in terms of genetic issues, are in that space. This builds on work that I did in the last Parliament, where I got through legislation to ban so-called virginity testing, again another issue around control of women, and also banning hymenoplasty, which were issues which hadn't been talked about for a long time, did only affect certain communities, but it's really important when we are looking at women's rights issues and around control in relationships that we actually start to address some of these things head on. And actually it can be sometimes it's legal changes which was required to lead that cultural change as well.
Well, let's pinpoint those communities. There's a high proportion in the British Pakistani community. Is that where the main issue is here?
There is a higher proportion in the British Pakistani community, in certain parts of the British Pakistani community as well. So these aren't religious issues. These are usually cultural issues within certain communities. And that's one of the things that I'm eager to break down, because I think there are so many negative consequences. Yes, for the individuals and the couple involved. Yes, in terms of control. Yes, in terms of genetic issues for their children. But I think, as you alluded to in your questions just before, I think there are also knock-on consequences for our wider society if people are very bound in just within one essentially extended family and don't feel part of a broader community. And that's an issue that I hope that this will, again, in some way, go to address.
Richard, did you feel a bit nervous bringing forward this proposed legislation because of the particular overrepresentation of cousin marriage within some ethnic minority communities? Did you fear that when you'd raise this proposal and this legislation in the Commons that you'd be receiving quite a lot of criticism for doing so? As you said, people have sort of avoided talking about this for quite a while. Even the coverage that's been done so far has often been a bit hesitant.
Yeah, no, I think there's always that concern. I had the same concern when I brought forward legislation around banning so-called virginity testing and hymenoplasty in the last Parliament as well, that it'd be seen as some form of attack. But I think actually the truth is that there's a lot of people in many of these communities, particularly women and actually a lot of men as well, who don't like these sorts of practices going on. What they want to see is change there. And actually sometimes they're looking to the national body politic to actually help deliver that change because it won't happen within. And I think that's one of those important points. Sometimes these issues require political leadership. I've had support from both Labour MPs, many Conservative MPs and from other parties as well. And I really hope that this is something that we can progress on a cross-party matter. When I asked a written question about it, the government didn't just say no outright, which is also helpful. I hope that they'll think about this as well. So I think this is something that I hope we can move forwards on together as a Parliament to support those people who are often, maybe feel trapped and vulnerable within some of these communities.
OK, well, Richard Holden, thank you very much indeed. Good luck with the bill tomorrow, former Conservative Party chairman. The only thing, I think, it should be banned, in my opinion. I mean, the health implications are truly awful. I imagine the cost of the NHS is very high indeed. But just policing it.
Yes, policing it, but also I think Richard touched on it there about the issue with clannishness and how the impact it has on our politics. That's a big problem. In this country, we don't really do extended loyalties to wider family members, so that could have some interesting implications as well. Yeah, that's very interesting. I hadn't thought of it in that way. Thanks for watching Good Afternoon Britain. Do not go anywhere. It's Martin Daubney up next, and I believe I'll be with Cameron Walker tomorrow.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Yes, it's time for your latest weather update here on GB News from the Met Office. A dry night for most places. Clear skies across Scotland and Northern Ireland will allow things to turn frosty and foggy, and there'll still be some rain across the southeast. A real north-south split with the weather. This chunky area of high pressure sitting across Scotland and Northern Ireland. That's where we've got the clearest skies. Frost forming pretty rapidly. Also, some thick fog patches developing. Meanwhile, the brisk breeze continues to bring quite a lot of cloud across the south, and plenty of showers for Essex, Suffolk, down across Kent, the London area, and even as far as Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. That cloud will keep the temperatures above freezing across the south, whereas further north, well below. Some sheltered glens of Scotland may get down to -10. There'll also be some fog across Scotland in the morning and Northern Ireland. Could be quite dense, that fog, particularly for the morning rush hour. Quite a lot of cloud across the Northern Isles, but dry here. It's further south, particularly the western side of the central belt, where that fog could be thick. Also, counties Fermanagh, Armagh and Tyrone also likely to have some dense patches of fog first thing in the morning. For most of England and Wales, it's a cloudy but dry start. Still a few showers, though, you'll notice, in and around the London area, crossing down through Kent. They'll still be there through the morning, slowly fizzling out. Not as many showers as today, certainly dry for the Midlands and eastern England. Brightening up, too, for northwest England, parts of North Wales. Should see some sunshine. Certainly most of Scotland and Northern Ireland looking to have a sunny day, although rain will trickle into Shetland later on. Temperatures are going to struggle, and some places will see that fog lasting all day across Scotland and Northern Ireland. If that happens, temperatures may not get much above freezing, and it's back for Wednesday morning. Really thickens up rapidly on Tuesday night. So again, dense patches of fog for Wednesday across parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland. England and Wales, again, predominantly cloudy, but apart from the odd shower on the south coast, most places staying dry. Temperatures, again, struggling in single figures, feeling cold.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's our festive treat to you. Your chance to win an incredible £50,000 in tax-free cash. Our biggest ever Great British giveaway. What would you spend £50,000 on in the coming year? Spectacular holidays, a brand new car, home improvements, or maybe you'd just like to save it for a special